good afternoon, SMITE fans, and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alien, where I'll be your host for set number 2, Best Taco of Olympus Bolts into that Tartarus Titans matchup. But before we get into anything about this number 2 set, I want to make sure to remind you guys back at home that when it comes to gaming, it comes to comfort. And if the most comfort that you could ever find whenever you're trying to play your own SMITE matches back at home is going to come with that Maxnomic seating chair. So make sure that you cop your very own Maxnomic by using code SMITEMAX. Show some support to the league, and not only that, save your back in the process. But joining me here for set number 2 is going to be our one and very only Gore Miser. And Gore, this is a pretty spicy matchup.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for this one. The Bolts right now are kind of on a tear that I personally didn't expect to see them on, if I'm being honest. Like, I expected some good things out of them and the Titans with the way they've both been rising up, but beating the Leviathans, beating the Valkyries, maybe a little more in hand for them. Now going up against the Titans, if they can do this, they can find themselves the perfect sweep in their group.
And it's one thing to win sets against teams in the SPL. It's another to do it in the dominating fashion that we've been seeing from this Bolts roster.
I think that's the biggest thing, is that they've had more versatility lately than we've gotten to see out of them, a lot of flexibility in their picks, but like you said, a much more dominating fashion. The one thing that we said about the Bolts a lot last year when they were playing as Renegades, a lot for most of this year until like the last 2 weeks, has been, man, can you imagine if Lasberg gave us that great performance every single game? And like, it was never a knock against him. He's a great jungler, but it was only about half the time that it would happen. Now it's been happening every single game, and the entire team has just jumped up with him.
And so you're talking about the jungle here for Lasberg and the type of performances he's been able to put on for us, but for me, it's a lot about that follow-up action in the process also, and Venenu has certainly looked like a mid to beat as of late.
Yeah, I think that's again the other side of the coin, right? Where Vin was in the same conversation, sometimes he looked phenomenal. His Merlin has been incredible the last few times we've seen it. Again, a lot of highlights that we've seen here have been that Merlin, but the picks that he's been bringing lately have just been too dominant for him. Like, it's getting to the point where now you're having to figure out what all you want to ban about them. Yes, Merlin is maybe his first and highest go-to god, but Morrigan looks pretty good for him. Throw Tiamat into the mix. Like, anything that he can grab, he's been making plays on, and that's something that the Titans are going to have to be worried about.
When you get somebody that's as mechanically consistent as Venenu in that mid lane role, you have to imagine that flexibility is just something that he really wants to bring on board for the team. Granted, though, this is not going to be an easy set for either side. I would imagine that Tartarus Titans have really been amping things up in the process also, and even reflected in the standings here, the Bolts still have their work cut up for them in terms of their playoff seeding.
Yeah, exactly what it comes to. If the Titans win this one, they will end up being the second seed coming through, the Leviathans taking that leap over. If they win this one, then they're going to be just fine sitting up there at the very top. And with the way things have been going, look, again, I think I said this maybe earlier on this week, maybe it was last week, but Avrin and all her summoning circles have found where the 3 game sets have been. They've just been waiting in the group stage the entire time. And that is maybe the best case scenario if you're the Titans trying to trip up the Bolts in 3-game set, but also maybe a good case for the Bolts, because then they get a little more practice going into the group stage.
Well, whether or not the Titans are going to be able to trip up the Olympus Bolts is something that's only to be determined leading into this set. But before we get into that, we've actually got Venenu, mid laner for the Olympus Bolts, joining us for the pregame interview. And then, first things first, how do you feel about the Awesome Jake rebranding that took place earlier this week of your team? Is there a potential name change in your future for the Vengo?
Probably not. I like the Olympus goats. That's pretty good. But Jake's got the goat covered. I don't need to change my name. He's there for it. So.
Well, maybe not a name change in your future, but as far as your play style is concerned, do you feel like there's any sort of weird changes that have taken place for you over your time in this first split?
I guess so. Like, I went into this year a little bit playing a different style, so I had a little bit to grow on that end of things, and I probably have like one of the best teams to like learn and grow, and honestly all these guys are like super motivated and everything like that, and I couldn't be happier to play with them and learn and grow with them. Still learning, that's the best part about it, so happy with it where I am.
And what is your favorite part of the team environment as you guys go through each set?
It's got to be our comms. They're always nice and fun. Even when things are going bad, someone just says something stupid and everybody laughs. Everybody's nice and relaxed, having fun and having a good time.
Well, always important to keep the team in a good headspace, and good to hear that from you, because this set, I'm sure you guys are definitely keeping your eyes open. But best of luck to you. Thanks for joining us here for the pregame interview, and looking forward to seeing what you guys have for us in this set today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
And that's the thing that you have to appreciate about a mid laner like Venenu. The guy's won Worlds, even won MVP once upon a time ago, Gore, but most importantly, he sent the fact that this team is one that is very open to criticism, or at least that's what I'm gauging off of the tidbits that he gave us. And for you, how do you think that might impact a team moving through a set like what they might encounter some of the difficulties against Titans?
It's going to be important for him just because of the fact that, like you said, when you're going up against a team like the Titans, who have been on a much more of a hot streak lately, they've definitely kind of stepped into the players that we've seen on this team. Like, there was a little bit of worries for him early on, but with the way Scary's been playing lately, there's definitely a lot of formidability, something in there. There's a word in there somewhere for somebody.
We'll catch up with it
Either
eventually.
way, that's exactly what they're facing here. And again, if this goes 3, which it would be par for the course this weekend, is going to be something that adaptability is going to be tested. They are a team that, again, if you can flex and say that you're coming in as the number 1 seed from this group, which was the group like with the number 1 seed in it already, you are going to be able to kind of showcase, I think, a lot more in that playoffs. Whereas if the Titans win this one, you lose that kind of clout that comes through. The Leviathans get to take it even though you beat them, just because of the way the numbers work out. And that's where I think they maybe have a little more hunger coming out of this.
And here's something that I think might be a little bit more fun heading into this set, is the fact that Titans know that they are a solidified team, with the Valhalla Valkyries' most recent set loss dropping them to 0-3 in the standings. But at the same time, I have to imagine that this Titan squad, for the success that they have been able to find in recent light, they might not want to reveal too much heading into that playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's something that they are maybe keeping their minds on. That's always been that strategy. When it comes to seeding games, that's almost the number 1 conversation, where you might see things that just straight up don't make sense, or maybe they make complete sense. It's just too normal, and it's because next week they're absolutely planning on pulling something ridiculous out that they wouldn't have otherwise needed to or wanted to show, versus something like what we just saw. Like with the Kings and the Scarabs, you got to go full stops. You're going to the final game, and it's lose or go home. You're going to pull out anything and everything that's going to work for you. Here, you do have that capability to kind of mask it.
I don't know if it could be more exciting, though, than watching Venenu and Paul go at it, because both of these players have very storied histories with their time in the SMITE Pro League. And I've just got to ask you, Gore, where do you gauge Paul to fall in this set?
Man, he is going to be so solid. Like, I think the way they've been playing lately, the Titans, like, it hasn't been through Paul the way that it feels like a lot of the games for the Knights were last year, where, I mean, even their Worlds run was through Paul. It was his Scylla that really was opening a lot of the doors. I think this one, there's a lot of weight on, like, your Scary, onto Aurora to really open things up, onto Benji to open things up, but Paul just gets to relax and have a really solid performance because of it, right? He has such great front lines around him opening up that room that I think it's going to allow him to flex around whatever he wants to play. He's going to be able to bring in. So theoretically, he's going to have a great performance unless Lasber just decides to sit on him.
Also, I have to give a quick shout-out really quick to Paul's notorious gamer lean.
Yeah.
Don't know how this man manages to do it, but it's got to provide him at least a little bit more of a stat power, because does it every single time, and he looks good on every single god that he plays. Whether or not the Tartarus Titans have been able to find success, I have definitely been impressed with Paul's gameplay.
And it's one of, like, his gamer lean does get to you, though, because you watch his camera through this game. It's gonna be like this. He's gonna be staring at his monitor, and anytime they click on mid, that it's in the same spot. Like, I think you could screen cap it from minute 0 to 10 minutes in, however long the games go. Just do one every 5 minutes and then put them next to each other, and it's going to be the same pose. He is static as opposed to what we've seen out of some of his teammates. But it's that focus, and that's that hyper focus that, like you kind of mentioned. It goes immediately into the gameplay. His body doesn't exist anymore. He is purely Smite at that point.
He becomes the Smite god at that point. It really is impressive, though, just how consistent he always manages to be throughout each and every game. Whether he's on a pick that he might prefer a little bit more or not, it's kind of irrelevant. He is someone with a very deep god pool, and I can definitely expect him to give Venenu some issues in that mid lane. But I also want to take a moment to kind of draw things back and revisit that jungler discussion, Gore, because Scary has definitely had his moments where we've all had a chance to think to ourselves, wow, this guy's insane. Doesn't matter that he made a role swap from last season to this one. He's still making it work in the jungle. But on the other hand, the times where he hasn't flourished has definitely left a lot more to be desired. Do you think that someone like Lasbra will be able to take advantage of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially with the way they've been playing, I think that they're going to be able to knock it down. Raven, Fenrir have been very, very kind so far to Scary and looking really good for the Titans as a whole. And I think the Bolts, because Lasbra will play anything and everything, sometimes things that aren't even meta, and he'll play them at that level, have the capabilities to limit the jungle role a little bit more, probably in that second phase of bans, maybe not so much right here, and be able to give Lasbra just a distinct advantage to try and cause Scary at least a little more stress.
Well, seems as though the Bolts don't want to take any sort of chances when it comes to that mid lane power pick position. It's the Raijin and the Tiamat as the immediate bans right off the bat. Just a lot of pressure already being put into the Titans' corner, and maybe even indicating to the Titans that they should be looking for a priority pick for Paul here in that top 3. Otherwise, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bolts just go all 5 across the board like what we saw from the Scarabs earlier against Genetics. That poor man just did not get to have fun that set.
Oh, well, you know what? I wouldn't count Paul out at being able to play a mid Athena, but I feel like that's at least one alleviation from him. But the problem is exactly this, right? Like, you can ban as much as you want early on. Right now, there's enough mages that are open and good that even if Yanis was banned there, you have the top 3. Your Merlins and your Morrigans, so much is still available for you to fall back on that it feels like it was almost a losing ban segment there. Not necessarily for the Bolts, but just in a way that they got rid of the annoying stuff, and now they have to deal with the annoying stuff still.
Titans really seem as though they have zero interest, though, in either trying to pick or deal with Chiron. They have consistently been stripping that Hunter pick away, just not wanting to have to worry about any of the cleanses that he might introduce. But I love this from the Bolts, just immediately locking in a really controlling solo pick here for Haddix. He has looked so strong every time he's gotten either King Arthur or Kakolin, and I would not be surprised if his only intention is just to try and run it down in the solo lane, especially with Gilgamesh being added into the mix.
I mean, it was that, second game against the Valkyries earlier this week where Haddix just had he was like 7-2. He just demolished them. There was one point he went into the back of them, fought 1v4, and won the fight. Granted, he had a lot of help throughout that game, but I think this is something like playing through the solo lane. It was kind of a struggle for the Bolts last year. I mean, they had SOT at one point, they had Variety, but it never seemed to really click until Worlds that they could really accomplish what they are trying to now as a team. And Haddix has fit in perfectly, seamlessly. I mean, it has been a great addition for this team, and it's made them, as a whole, feel better.
Do you think that the Titans made the right decision here, though, going for the Yemoja so early on? Because the front line has been all but revealed here for the Titans, and I guess my concern would be Yemoja can feel really good, but Giannis as a centerpiece for mobility, maybe not necessarily the most ideal for follow-up.
Yeah, and I think it leads them into this. This has actually been what the Bolts have been doing. I'd have to go back and look at every individual Ares game, but anytime there's a Giannis on the other team, if the support's low mobility as well, and Yemoja's relatively low mobility unless you happen to have your Riptide available, and sometimes it's used aggressively, sometimes used defensively. This Ares has been really good at slowing everything down from mid and supports.
Well, Awesome Jake would certainly be the GOAT for his team if he can consistently find those chains for the cripple factor. Yeah. A lot of the mobility from the Titans is fairly dependent on those leap aways and portals, so Ares cripple definitely going to be a strong asset for shutting that down and helping the follow-up swarm from that King Arthur and Gilgamesh. And Gore, just looking at these top 3 from both teams, where do you expect the Titans to take the rest of their draft?
Man, that's going to be difficult because Gilgamesh already feels like it's, well, no, absolutely is going to be jungle, right? Like, that's a difficult front line to deal with. And as a jungler, I mean, where do you go? Like, the Raven has been clean for him, but I look at Giannis, and again, when that cripple factor with Ares comes in, yeah, his damage is going to be good, but I feel like you need another punch coming down from the jungle, and that's going to be what's difficult. Now with Merlin being banned as well, you're narrowing it down. The carry is where I think you're going to have a lot of power for the Titans. I might not mind on her, although he's been disappearing slowly from the meta. I'm trying to go through my mind as to which one of them. I guess, no, not even Heimdall. I can't think of where I want him to go here. Any pick I think is just going to get bashed by that front line.
Well, the Danzabaru pick going to be finding itself as the lock-in choice for the Bolts, and with Medusa having been banned away, this is a stark switch-up for Barracuda. I believe his first time even representing the Danzabaru here.
Yes, this is not something I'm used to seeing him. Zap's played it once, I think, this year, and then otherwise it has been Panda Cat. Nobody else has really been willing to touch him. Nobody's been playing him, and Panda Cat's played him really well. It's been very interesting to see. I'm excited what this is going to bring from Barra because we haven't gotten to see him flex around as much. Like, I think the biggest flex he's had so far out of meta has been like Jingwei, and even still, that's not that crazy.
Do you have any concerns for this Danzabaru, though, getting caught out by the likes of the Emoja, or even now the Fenrir Brutalize, I think, going to be a strong tool in terms of trying to spot out the Danzabaru whenever he's looking to go into that field of his for the Fatalis effect and the escape off the leaf mobility?
Yeah, I think she's going, like Yamoja specifically, but like you said, with Fenrir, with on her even here, I think Danzabaru is going to have a little bit of trouble having health in lane, I guess is the best way to describe it. I think there's a lot of lockdown for him, but when I look at this, like Yamoja on her can absolutely control the lane and the pace of it. Like early game clear should go their way, but Ares Danza kind of feels like it wants to fight, and that's what I'm getting out of this. Is I'm wondering if that's what's on the Bolt's mind. Lasbra coming over here and trying to control the duo.
No shock, though, seeing that Morgan being locked in here for Venenu. It is a pick that he has time and time again fallen back to, and it leaves the rest of this pool pretty open for him. A lot of ideal god choices that he can transform into. Potential double ult Gilgameshes would be a nightmare to deal with surrounding a little bit of that objective play. But Gore, I want to ask you, when it comes to Morgan versus Giannis, who do you expect to really get the better end there?
Early on, I think Giannis, just because it's clear, like it's going to help him out, and his damage is going to be consistent. But later on, that like the transformations we've seen, specifically again from Venenu, like once I factor that into it, he has been so consistent with this Morgan play lately. When he's not on Merlin, he's made her look phenomenal. And I don't know if there's a bad transformation for him in this game. Maybe Danza, depending on how Barra's doing, but like that's the worst case scenario. There's so many good frontliners to turn into, but again, we've seen it countless times, being able to transform even into the Giannis, into the on-her. All of that's going to make things look really good for him if he wants to just go more damage. But Yamoja bringing some sustain to his team, Kukulkan a lot more knockups, which I don't know if you needed if you could get a second Gilgamesh or a second Ares, but there's just so many options for him. I think that late game he's going to be able to take control.
And Morgan as well, I think, is a pick that we have seen have hit or miss success throughout the SPL. But Venenu, for sure, this is definitely one of his more staple gods. And I really like the fact that the Ares just continues to be a punishing or a potentially suppressive factor into what the Titans have allotted for. I mean, Fenrir, Anher, Yamoja, Kukulkan, Giannis. All of those gods have a decent amount of reliability on their escape functions. And I don't know about you, Gore, but personally speaking, I've never liked the Fenrir-Ares matchup.
Not at all. And like to think that they locked that in after seeing what Jake has done against comps like this with Ares, like this is something that they came into it knowing, at least for those last two picks, Anher's going to have trouble surviving. Fenrir's going to have trouble engaging and disengaging depending on where he happens to be in the fight. Granted, maybe they're banking on those chains being used exclusively for Giannis, but he gets 3 of them as long as he hits 1. That's going to be the thing. I think as long as you can lock down all three of them, even just two people in the middle of a fight, Jake's got his worth tenfold.
And even when you break it down just for that support versus the ADC factor, I do think that the Honor could potentially struggle here because that Impale not going to be as effective against a god who has knockback immunity whenever he is channeling that Searing Flesh. Plus the percent pen shred, always a nice little asset.
Always nice. Plus, this is such a really small part of Ares' kit, but he does technically have that small amount of sustain on bolster defenses now. And so while it's nowhere near what Yamoja's going to be outputting, there's some survivability in there outside of just his natural tankiness and the tankiness he'll provide to Bara.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see how these teams line up in game number 1, but for that, we'll leave all the action up to Dulcin and Hinduman.
That's right, it's the Tartarus Titans and the Olympus Bolts going toe-to-toe here in game number 1. My name is Dulcin. Hinduman is with me, and Doug working the camera. And Hinduman, this one, all over in Group A, all set in stone. No one left to make it into the group. Say again.
What's with using my full name?
Did I call you Graham?
No, you used Hindu, man. Just called me Hindu. I don't get why you would say Hindu.
You're my superior.
It's so long.
I got it right. It's like instead of sir, I say Hindu man, right? I mean,
I get a really exciting game here. It doesn't matter to me because, you know, on paper, one of these teams will win and one won't. They're both going through to the group stage. And Dave, I'm just here to give you a breath for a second. That's all.
That's right. You and I are just going to cheer one the entire game, I think. So we agreed on there's going to be zero analysis left at any point throughout this matchup. I kid, of course. But this is actually a pretty interesting spot for the Olympus Bolts to be in, isn't it? Where you are either first in your group or you're last in the group. They're obviously, I think if they win one game, they're confirmed first in the group. And if they win the whole thing, of course, they'll be first in the group because they'd be undefeated. But an interesting spot where you could either be top or bottom. And in a situation like that, they're going to give Awesome Jake this Ares, which is always pretty fun to watch. And then Barracuda the Danzaburo. Certainly a fun matchup over there in the duo lane.
Yeah, surprised by the Danzaburo pick, mainly because I was thinking maybe the Apollo could have fit in there a little bit better, just because of the Giannis up against them too, right?
Right.
Because we saw the Giannis earlier on this week against the Apollo, and it does kind of match a bit of that split push potential, keep a bit of pressure on the map. But going with the Danzaburo, he's on the rise. You know, I do think he's a solid investment in terms of he wants to fight. He's good in a 1v1.
I love
Space control. Especially against a team that's going to all in you. I think the biggest concern is what Scary D can do up against it, though, because I do think it's susceptible to the Fenrir with the all-in capabilities.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting watching this Fenrir pick, because I think similar to Danzaburo, Fenrir has also been on the rise here as of late. I don't think Fenrir has the same goofy ultimate capability that Barracuda has. There's something about that rocket just like flying around the corner into these team fights that always catches me a bit off guard. But
there was a great one on Reddit actually where Panda Cat was in a team fight and people noticed it. I think it was a game in Agrocast. It was like, watch Panda Cat in this fight. He gets hit by a space and time, and he was ulting to join the fight, and then immediately went back to base.
Oh, nice.
On his rocket, like, nope, I'm out. It was beautiful.
So awesome about it. Potential engage here in the duo lane as Aurora taunted in for just a moment, but we'll walk away from that one. What a world we live in where Yamoja's getting out-pressured here in lane by an Ares. That's going to maybe open up a purple buff invade here shortly, but Scary D, privy to it, will make his way to the left.
Yeah, it's a good point. I will say right at the beginning of that game in that duo lane, though, there's a really good impale that came out from Cyclone early on, where Jake hits level 2 quite quickly and held that fort. They've got a crazy engagement in the jungle.
And it's been a stun onto Aurora, who will Riptide away, dodge out the chains as well to keep the Yamoja on the map just a little bit longer. Is the purple buff invade going to go through is the question. For the time being, looks like Lasbra is going to play a little bit more cautiously. Nothing else to be gained here. Scary D certainly powerful in the early game on this Fenrir, but instead, Awesome Jake's going to provide enough room for the rest of the Olympus Bolts to collapse in. Purple buff dropped on down, picked up by Jake.
Oh,
but Lasbra stunned against the wall, and Cyclone Spin will find first blood.
Can they get more? That was the real question. Cyclone's in an awkward spot there, but the chain is now down. Interesting play from Bolts, because I like the decision at first there, Dave. They waited because they saw that Yamoja was out of any sort of Omni at all. He used 2 Riptides there, Aurora, which consumed all of his Omni at the moment. So they knew the purple buff wasn't really at risk. They waited for Barracuda to pressure the wave and be able to rotate in. But in doing so, the reposition from Titans was good. They allowed the Impale to come through from Cyclone and pick themselves up an easy pickup there onto Lasbury, who didn't have any beads to escape.
Lasted a little while as well. I mean, that was kind of a tug of war happening. Gave the Tartarus Titans the ability to reposition. Cyclone Spin over the wall, grab first blood. Always fun to watch it on her in these games as well. On her is really roared into the scene, I guess, here.
Get out! Get out! I'll solo
the hesitation
now.
there for just a moment. The side eye
I heard you pause, and I was like, what's about to come out of your mouth next?
Look, it could have been worse, right?
Heard the roar. That's how basic we are now, Dave? Is that where
I
we're
said
at?
he roared into Season 8. I don't know. I scratched and clawed his way into the meta.
Can we start? No. What was your point anyway?
I was going to say it's always fun because On Her has 1v1 potential. Now he's got a kill, and Cyclone Spin is an aggressive player, and it's going to be fun to watch.
That's really good content. We could have just done without the Aurora bit, you know? It would have been all fine there. But yeah, you are right. Like, Anher is one of the, in a weird way, Anher's one of the perfect hunters in a lot of ways because he's that balance of great with crit, and great with pen builds too because of his passive.
Right.
But also he's got scrap potential. The pillar's always going to be useful in games. The fact the Impale can knock back, there's a knock up in the kit, and then CC immunity. I think Anher's one of those that will always be around the meta, even if he's not the number one in the meta.
All right, plenty of utility in the kit.
However,
gives him viability.
Up against the Dansborough, I think it is a 50-50 matchup, that one, for the most part. It really is who gets the jump on the other, which generally comes down to the best players in the world. That happens of whoever gets the jump.
has the jump.
Here we go. You're really warming up. Well, this is game one. We're 5 minutes in.
I know, you're right. That's on me. I got to reel it back in a little bit here.
Yeah, the chat.
We'll see. That's right. It's on me to keep us in some sort of semblance of sanity here. And Barracuda jumped on by a couple of the Tartarus Titans, gobbled on up by Scary D. And Aurora with the stun will confirm the kill there onto Barracuda. This left side of the map has just felt bad, it feels like, for the Bolts over the first few minutes.
Beautiful little play there as well, though, from Scary D, realizing exactly what's going down there. Barracuda starts charging the ultimate, realizes he ain't going anywhere, so he ends up free-firing it, hoping to try and get away, but the Ragnarok usage just, you know, CC immunity, doesn't get hit by the stun. Barra picks apart in the jungle, and that's exactly what Fenrir can bring.
And it's a great start for Scary D as well. We've talked a little bit about the ebbs and flows of the season that Scary D has had here so far. The Robin pick for a while, I think, really kind of eased him into the meta a little bit more effectively. Now these early game junglers like the Fenrir maybe feeling more comfortable for him. And the Tartarus Titans off to a pretty comfortable lead here. It's a pretty quiet 1,500 gold lead that's got brought up. If you want to notch 500 of it up to first blood. The rest of that 1,000 gold lead has been built up pretty organically here. Benji's got a 1-level lead over Haddock. So the Tartarus Titans probably feel like they're in pretty good control of the map here in the early.
And you're going back to what you're saying about Scary D there. I mean, the start of the season, you look at this squad on paper, very established team, been around for a long time. Every single player in their role is like, wow, these are a powerhouse. But Scary D in the jungle has always been the question mark. How quickly could he get up to form to stick with the likes of the current junglers in the SPL? And no surprises, right? He's going to struggle at times. He's going to have a hard time making decisions of when's it time to aggress, when's it time to defend. But more importantly, what the team state is, what kind of playstyle the team wants to have. Because generally the jungler has to dictate that all the time. Are we farming up Cuvo Fred style, or are we going balls to the wall every game, which you'll see out of some others?
That's right. And Scary D has built up that language a bit, I guess, in his head and started to understand the language of the ebbs and flows of the SPL here in Season 8 pretty effectively. Things have quieted down just a little bit. Scary D had made a couple adventures over to the left-hand side, punished Barracuda once or twice. Awesome Jake hasn't quite maybe found the early aggression that he had hoped for on this Ares. They had a good bit of pushing going in against Aurora and Cyclone Spin. That purple buff invade gone a bit wrong, I think, has stemmed a bit of that. But now you get to this part. Hindu, 7.5 minutes in. Awesome Jake has the blink. The ultimate is ready to go. Time to start getting some of those 5 sets of beads on cooldown.
That's a good point about the 5 beads. I like this decision from the Titans this game because they've got a 2-kill lead, a 2k gold lead too, right? So why not just sit back a little bit? Look for the opportunities in groups like you're doing now. And if there is a no escape, you know, everyone's got beads. So play around that situation. It's Olympus Bolts that have to get aggressive, and Jake's doing just that.
And he uses his blink to find the opening engage. Scary D's health bar melting away. Has to use the Ragnarok to stay in. Jake has only pulled one on back through space and time. Has clipped Awesome Jake, and a lot of that health now missing, but there's no follow-up from the Tartarus Titans onto the backline. Awesome Jake has survived, but so has Cyclone Spin. And it is a roar against the world. Barracuda will pick up his first of the game.
Great little work from Veneno in that engagement. Churns into the Gilgamesh, drops the early wins to Shamash, but more importantly, body blocks to make sure his teammate Jake stays alive there. Jake was in a lot of trouble. He took the brunt of the damage by forcing the engagement there, but he would have died if Veneno didn't end up going in there and forcing the Tartarus Titans back again. Bolts find a good pick and then respond with an invade of their own at that red buff.
Wasn't that you that was talking about all the big combos you could do with double Gilgamesh. I think you saw you and Aggro were casting, and it was a Morgan Gilgamesh game, and the double drop kick happened a couple of times. There's something humorous, I think, about that as well. But I think that's more of an indicator of how versatile this Morgan pick can be, where in any given situation, a good player will make that correct decision kind of in a split second. And there are plenty of targets for Venenu to look towards this game, aren't there? Where Lasbra in that moment, the Gilgamesh was the correct option, but a second Giannis on this map could provide plenty of utility for Venenu. There are a lot of targets, I think, that Venenu has an option for as the game rolls on.
And that's the thing with the Morrigan. Ever since she's been released, I mean, the biggest difference maker for her is every single time a new god comes out, that's technically another god in her kit to have to learn to make sure you can play her very effectively. And we'll have to see exactly how that continues on in the game, because Morrigan is great, but it's always about target selection of who you transform into, because you can change your fight completely based off your selection.
Especially in some of the stealth as well, not even outside of the ultimate, but the ability to get in and out of those fights, very, very important here. Time to check in on the builds, and one thing immediately jumps out to me here, Hindu, and that is Benji has picked up the Gauntlet of Thebes at the solo lane. Look, you're a Stone of Gaia proponent through and through, and made that no secret to anyone. What is Thebes telling you here out of the solo lane?
Well, the only real reason I can really look at that and go, why would this work, or why is this bad or good? I'm going to say it's okay.
Sure.
Mainly because he's a pro player. But secondly, it's because when you think about how the engagements are going to go off with the Emoja and with Benji specifically, they are going to be split up in these fights a lot, which means those auras from the Gauntlet of Thebes will be spread across the whole team still. So you'll have Benji on the front line, probably with Scary D, diving on in, going very deep into these fights, and they'll get the protection from those Thebes. Whereas Aurora will be sat more at the back line, sticking with Paul, sticking with Cyclone. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing to double dip into in auras sometimes, but I can understand some methods to the madness there. He is going to need some physical defense, and he is going to need some magical defense in this game, specifically with an Ares and a Morrigan. There's a lot of transformation targets from Morrigan too, as we mentioned. We'll see how it works out for him, though, because it's not the most terrible build in the world.
I wonder if that allows then, depending on where Benji thinks he'll be playing, his awesome Jake takes a trip through the portal. I wonder if that then opens up, maybe, you know, if he's playing with Scary D alongside him through a lot of the game, Scary D then can maybe build a little bit more into the damage tree, a little less defense on his side, something like that, depending on who he's pairing with.
And if you look at Scary D's build so far, there's no tank boots, he is Warrior Tabby, and it's also Jotuns for more cooldown. So at the moment so far, you are correct. However,
that doesn't happen often.
Pro players like to make us feel comfortable that we're right, and then change it up later. So just keep an eye for defense on Scary as the game goes on.
Yeah, maybe I've caster cursed myself here 11 minutes into the game. We'll have to wait and find out. As the Olympus bolts rotate over, it's a quiet Pyromancer. No real attention paid by the Tartarus Titans. Gold Fury is up here on the left side of the map, and given how the onset of this game has gone and how things have continued to go, Cyclone's been 2 levels now over Barracuda on this on her. Now 1, maybe call it level and a half for Cyclone Spin there. Maybe you start seeing the Titans get more comfortable starting up an early objective.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, when you actually look at their opportunity to secure Gold Furies and the likes, Titans do have a bit of a better situation there for my money in terms of what they have on offer to secure is always the bigger key. And when you look at Cyclone, you look at Paul, I feel a bit more confident than the Morrigan or Barracuda at the moment. Unless Barragan's going to literally throw his rocket and himself in there onto that Gold Fury, still not too confident. But I do like this from Titans. Pressuring left, because that can set up for the gold.
And now maybe another kill on the board. Barracuda brutalized down in Aurora yet again is going to be the one to pick up the kill. Not the ideal target for those kills, but still good nonetheless for the Tartarus Titans. They've got pressure over on the left. Now awesome Jake walks in. Scary D's health bar melting away. We've talked about a little the squishiness maybe here in the early game that he's got. Now the Titans on retreat.
And now Aurora could be in still some trouble here. Jake's just trying to keep pace with him so far. Trying not to use the no escape unless he has to. Could look for 3 targets for 3 sets of beats, but a great impale from Cyclone Spin.
Awesome Jake pushed back into the River's Rebuke here. That crashes down, and Aurora has got another one here in this game. But Venenu immediately trades out. Paul is rotated over with the through space and time, and it looks like that's all she wrote for this one. Aurora almost on a killing spree here onto this Yemoja. The last hits have been there.
Yeah, credit where it's due to Aurora's actual River's Rebuke there at the tail end, because that Cyclone was in trouble, but he did at least make sure it was a 1-for-1. The problem was, by dropping that, Cyclone stuck around for the kill, ends up down to the rotation out of Venenu, who again selected that mid lane, so that jungler Gilgamesh to help him out. So I think that's where Ven's going to keep leaning, especially if Gilga keeps pace. And at the moment, talking about pace, sure, Scary's ganking a lot and doing well, Dave, but he is behind in farm quite significantly.
3 levels. He's 3 levels down. It's a 0-0-4 Fenrir. But Lasbra at 0-1 and 2 has got a 3-level lead over his jungle counterpart. So it's been looked pretty comfortable for the Bolts jungler, then rotating into the fights almost after the fact has been paying off now for the Olympus Bolts. Been quiet over here on the right side of the map. Hindu, this is a King Arthur versus Cullen matchup I think we've got to just get used to here at this point, because
don't try doing that chair one thing, right, where you try and throw it at the solo lane and make the chair two talk about it, because I'm not doing that.
Okay,
like,
all right.
It's Cullen, right, and it's Arthur. I hate
Are you
both.
talking about the solo lane right now?
No, I'm just saying, we've seen that match all year. It ain't going anywhere right now. It's just going to be who makes the bigger impact on the rotation, right? Is that what you're going to ask?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I asked that question too, and I know there's no real answer, but good news!
I can't outchair
There's
the
a goal fury, Dave. Let's go.
There isn't. It's down to half HP as the Olympus Bolts in range to contest this one. The rocket!
Oh, he did it!
And he steals it away. Awesome Jake's got all of them in the chain, but all of them will use their beads to stay alive through space, and time flies back in, and Cyclone Spin will find the return kill on this engagement, but the Tartarus Titans do not have the health to hang around. It'll be a Gold Fury for the Bolts and a kill for the Titans.
Yeah, great little play actually from Barracuda there, more importantly, because he even bought a bit of time for an initial further engagement after the fact. We mentioned I felt comfortable with the Titans around the Gold Fury. The only risk was Barracuda with the rocket coming in, and guess what he did? Straight in.
He did it.
You can't call it.
And it was comedic timing, wasn't it, where you just see this big rocket fly around the corner, steal it away. Seen a bunch of steals here this weekend and a lot of contested games.
And they've made big changes too.
They have, and for the Olympus Bolts, that gives them a bit of a more comfortable foothold in this game. 600-700 gold now in the lead for them, though the Tartarus Titans are up 5-2 in the kills department. You wonder just how impactful it actually is that Aurora is the one picking up all of these kills. I mean, obviously it's sort of minutia, right? It might make a small difference, but do you think over time, 3 kills in Aurora's back pocket, maybe that contributes to a bit of the level discrepancy in the jungle?
If you look at the difference between the two supports at the moment, the Pridwin's fully online for Aurora, and this allows Aurora to play even more aggressive if he wants to. Scary's in trouble and has to Ragnarok.
He needs to get away, but I don't think he will, as Awesome Jake's got him in the chains. And he'll burn him away, and Scary D, he's just going to fall further behind on this one. Lasboro's there for the assist. Now it's back to a 3-level lead out of the jungle, and there's plenty of farm coming up over here on the right-hand side for the Olympus Bolts to strip away. It's going to be a speed buff, some back camps. If they stick around, at least it'll be the greater Scorpion.
I do love Jake on this pick, though, and the one thing about Ares specifically is that he's very much a feel god of, like, if you're in the zone and you're hitting those chains religiously,
Jake is always in the zone.
So many problems, and you're right, most of the time Jake is in the zone. Today, he's hitting multiple chains and set up for his team. There's nothing worse than seeing an Ares run at you who isn't scared, who isn't fearful of losing anything whatsoever.
And it feels good just a moment ago. Look, Awesome Jake, I think, had almost everyone for the Titans in the ultimate. 3 sets of beads, all on cooldown there in the bottom left between Paul, Aurora, and Cyclone Spin. Had to get burnt away by Jake, and that's all you can ask for, right? You use one ultimate, you get 3 sets of beads offline. That opens up a little control over there on the left side of the map. So Jake definitely been feeling comfortable on this Ares pick here so far. Now it's time for Barracuda to start to play a little bit of catch-up here. It's going to be difficult as long as Cyclone Spin and Barracuda are left alone here over on the left. But given how the game started, as long as Barracuda can just stay alive, you're maybe feeling good now if you're the Bolts.
Quiet game from Paul so far, but no real surprises because he's playing the Giannis. He's going to farm up in the mid-game, but Veneni's doing a better job out rotating. That's one thing to really note there. Up against the Giannis, you are worried about getting out rotated through the space and times.
Right.
But I have noticed Veneni making more of an impact on these rotations very more often.
That's a great point. Paul has sent those through spaces and times into that left lane a handful of times here, but Venenu is absolutely been right on his coattails. It's another Pyromancer started up by the Bolts here. The first one of the game went quietly, and it looks like this one will as well. And, you know, again, these are these small things that individual Pyromancers don't necessarily make or break a game. But now you've given up 2 kind of for free now if you're the Titans.
Paul's in trouble here in the mid, and he's going to have to use his ult early. He will get away for the time being, though, but that's another ultimate force. Still holds his beads for now. I was just about to mention, though, that Pyromancer, like you said, second one so far, Dave. It's not something we always see is the focus on the Pyro, but Bolts have clearly realized Titans have let this slip in their game plan. They've noticed this window and are trying to exploit it of like, hey, this is free gold.
Right.
We can just keep taking it if they're not going to turn up.
And it's smart when you have Lasborough still with that 3-level lead, Haddix and Benji. As we've discussed, they're just farming away, waiting to rotate into those fights and have a bit of an impact.
Oh,
but
they
it's
will.
They will have their impact.
We've
seen King Arthur and Cullen do plenty of impacting here so far this weekend. Awesome Jake back over towards the mid lane is going to pull Aurora right back in, but a Ragnarok answers back, and Jake brought underneath the tier 1 tower in mid, and then the follow-up stun is there, and the Ares has overextended. Scary D on the board for the first time now this game as Aurora will throw up the Rivers Rebuke. Venenu transfers into the Gilgamesh, jumps himself on out as Winds of Shamash separates the fight.
Yeah, Venenu's still running though because Benji ain't done yet. He'll get the Aegis, but a great drop kick from Lasbra.
Oh, he's peeling out for his jungler now as Paul sends through space and time right back into the fight. Haddock's impaled against the wall, and Benji finds the second kill of the fight for the Tartarus Titans. There were good individual moments from the Bolts, but the collapse a bit better for the Titans.
Credit where it's due to Benji in that engagement, though. He takes Lasbra out, he takes Venenu out of the fray, forces the Bolts to go, we need to save our mid laner. And as soon as they do that, Dave, the back line of the Titans just start to pick them apart. And this opens up a less than 20-minute fire giant.
And it's smart, I guess, right? Venenu doesn't have his ultimate. He can't transfer over. Barracuda's got the rocket.
Mr. Rocket!
He's going to try again.
Here we go!
Oh, no.
Does he go out?
Yep. He turns around and flies away. Will he get out, though? The pillar actually decent at keeping Barracuda in check. Now the chase is on for the Tartarus Titans. Barracuda down to half HP, but Lasbra's right back into the fight as well. Scary D, low health, no mana. Last bit that he's got goes into the Ragnarok to disengage, but the Olympus Bolts not letting the Titans go quietly.
Was a chance there, I feel, for the Bolts to get aggressive, especially because Barracuda ended up beating them pretty heavily. Paul, that ultimate, just so you know, wasn't misaimed. It was to help out his team. Not the greatest one of all time, if I'm honest, and still the chase is on here. Jake's got his ultimate back up, looking for something, knowing a few beads might be down.
That's right, and the mana still pretty low for a couple of the members of the Tartarus Titans. Awesome, Jake. Toss a chain Benji's way. Aurora throws up the Rivers Rebuke. And that's all she wrote here for this engagement. 20 minutes in, Tartarus Titans, all 5 will get out with the FG buff. Awesome Jake, noticed just a moment ago, picked up Phantom with that second relic slot. All for that Rivers Rebuke, I suppose, here with the way that Aurora's been separating out these engagements.
Definitely, someone gets trapped in that against the walls. That's the biggest thing that Yamocha really brings to the fray that people underestimate, is just how impactful the Rivers Rebuke from cutting off exits can really be. I do like the fact once it's upgraded, though, it's going to give you that 15% damage mitigation buff.
Never a bad thing.
And if you think about a Yamocha wall followed by a Giannis ultimate, you prevent some of that damage too. But now it's Titan's control here. This Gold Fury will go, or should I say Primal Fury will go down. And it's up to tower push at this point, and they can split the map up if they choose.
It's always so interesting when the Fire Giant gets taken this early in the game, because later on you're looking at Phoenix Sieges and potential game ends. Now literally every single tower except Tier 1 and mid is left on the map. So this is where this gold lead will really take a swing for the Tartarus Titans. We're effectively dead even as we stand in that gold department. The Fire Giant secure brought it back to even for the Titans. But plenty of gold deposits left on the map, and still maybe even enough in that department that the Bolts feel comfortable enough contesting underneath this Tier 2 tower. Awesome Jake pulls 2 back in. It's half HP onto the tower. Is Awesome Jake pulled back in with 4 members of the Tartarus Titans, but now Lasbra, Venenu, they've joined the front line. It's a big stagger on the back end as Benji looking to disengage. The ultimate is flown through from Paul, clipped down just a bit of health here, but somehow no one's dead.
But Benji gets a good root up, and Jake's health bar dropping lower. In comes Lasbra. Drop kick to the face, and Haddox with the kill.
And now Benji low as well as Barracuda looking to chase him down, and the last auto's got him. Cyclone's been trying desperately to kite away, but he will not survive, and the Olympus Bolts will find 3. That not only stalls out the rest of this FG play, but gets the FG off 3 members of the Titans, maybe 4 if Aurora goes down.
Yeah, Rock could go down, but he's trying to get through the portal that didn't get the opportunity to. Ben gets a double kill. That's a Tier 2 at the least. They could get a Phoenix here, I think, Dave.
Yeah, what a tug of war is going on over on the left-hand side of the map. It was a Tier 2 on one side. Now it's the Olympus Bolts taking the Tier 2 for themselves over on the left. Paul doing his best over in the mid lane just to push up some of these minions. Unfortunately, tower damage seems a bit low here for the Bolts. Likely won't stick around for a Phoenix. Paul will take down a little bit of damage in the mid lane, but Lasbra is here to contest as well. Paul will make his way through the portal and do some damage to Lasbra on the back end as well, but the chase is on. I think Lasbra might not have the legs, but Paul goes back in, sends it through space, and what was the damage? The soul gem!
How can he do that while
before
leading?
my eyes!
He's
Before my eyes!
He's not even straight, and he still did. That's crazy.
Well, that's the ultimate power. If he was straight up, I'd be concerned that
was
something's wrong, right?
When he fired the ult, I was like, okay, this is brave, Paul. This is a bit too brave. And it worked out. I was really surprised by how much damage he did. That's one thing.
I couldn't believe it.
I can't believe he bursted him down so well, but it did isolate Lasbra off the map and kind of slow down Bolts looking for any sort of extra pressure there whatsoever. Crazy game so far. Now, going back to that Tier 2 tower that Bolts defended, though, against the Fire Giant.
Forever ago, right?
It really was. Jake's ultimate at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the fight, was pretty solid. But more importantly, Scary did the same thing again, where straight afterwards, he picks up Jake and tries to carry him to his team. Jake held on to bolster defensives there, and that came up huge for him because it just makes him a little bit tankier for a little while longer. So as he gets dragged back to the team, they don't have the damage to burst him down, and it allows Bolts to regroup, realize that they're all clumped up trying to kill Jake, and reinitiate after the fight.
And the fact that the gold and experience felt so even there, obviously you're feeling more comfortable if you have the FG, but it was not such a lopsided moment.
No.
Yeah, I think the first big dip on the gold side there is right around that Tier 2 tower defense. So Olympus Bolts playing their cards correctly and defending the Tier 2 tower. Now, we're about a minute away from this Fire Giant respawning. We're 24 minutes in. Primal Fury a little bit behind the FG. So every once in a while you'll see Fury on one side, Fire Giant on the other, but I think all eyes have to be on the right-hand side here.
Seeding is important for these two teams when you look at the playoffs, but at the same time, the one thing that you can feel in this game already, though, is there a little less pressure because of the whole fact of like, hey, we made it through.
We're in.
We can be a bit loose with this one and scrap a little bit more, and both teams are doing just that so far. Mainly instigated from Scary D and Jacob been the two initiators. Lasbra has been in the scene. More importantly, I feel like Lasbra's been more of a buff bot for Venenu, who has been using this very aggressive use of the Gilgamesh.
Yeah, the Gilgamesh has been so fun to watch. That scrappy fight play style is just an absolute treat. I guess in seeding again is important, but if I think about Group B right now, this is Group A. If I'm thinking about Group B, I don't want to play against any of those teams. I don't know if I'm Group B, I want to play against anyone over here on Group A either. I think all the teams that we're bringing to the Phase 1 playoffs are a threat to be sure. Of course, that all-important first seeding is important because you get a bye to that second round, and that's something that the Bolts are still playing for, looking for one win here in this set to confirm that. So that's important, of course. But if you're thinking seeding is going to change the difficulty of your matchup drastically on the other side.
Not with how everyone's played.
I think you got something else coming for you. Oni Warriors are the first seed in that group, too. What a crazy weekend we've had here in the group stages. All culminates in a fun matchup here between the Tartarus Titans and the Olympus Bolts. So the Fire Giant has respawned. Primal Fury is coming up over on the left-hand side as well. Scary D has closed up that experience gap just a little bit. Lasbra now just holding one level over the Fenrir. And so this will be an interesting kind of metagame moment where we see how much pressure is getting put on the Primal Fury versus the FG. You can see maybe a quick moment where one objective gets snuck over on a team.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is going to be ward wars. It's something that like goes unnoticed a lot of the time, but who gets the positional advantage and catches people out of position, or on a ward that just wasn't spotted in the jungle can be a big game changer. At the moment, Titans are the ones in the FG pit trying to clear out and get some control, and it's all about who's going to better situation of like clumping up as a team, and it is Titans right now that have the better wave. hi-rez has been quite deep as of late, but I'm expecting some engages soon from him.
The Olympus Bolts nursing a small gold lead here, and we're likely to see a big engagement as Awesome Jake has got a couple in the ultimate, but the beads will get used by both Scary D and Aurora, who throws up the River's Rebuke, and hi-rez caught in on that one, but a King Arthur feeling just fine as the Surge comes back out from the Olympus Bolts on the backline. Venenu has chipped a good bit of damage away from Scary D and kept the Fenrir out of the fight as well, and Lasbra throws down the Gilgamesh ultimate to force the Tartarus Titans back around this corner, but Awesome Jake all the time has been getting whittled away. A stun onto a roar will all but confirm the kill, and it's Venenu who picks it up. But look at Lasbra. Look at Jake.
Benji's full
plenty of health left on the map here for the Titans.
It's the two solo lanes we were talking about. Is hi-rez and Benji are the two, but Benji doesn't know who to pick apart. He's waiting for teammates to really rally round. But he's got to protect Cyclone Spin. Meanwhile, look at where Paul is on the tier 2. Benji's trying to make sure Cyclone doesn't die and can get back to base before he can like be a bit free. And Venenu's still hunting, but hi-rez will get him.
No, hi-rez just walks within range and grabs the last shot on the Cyclone Spin. And that's a big stagger here because, look, 4 members of the Olympus Bolts are left on the map. You're 50 seconds without Cyclone Spin. You got to go back and heal, I imagine, here if you're the Bolts, but you can grab some control over here on the Fire Giant side.
There was some target selections from Bolts there that I really enjoyed, though. Venenu was hunting Scary D the whole time in the jungle, trying to keep him out of the fray, trying to whittle it down his health bar, because he's not super tanky this game, this Fenrir.
Right.
Makes sense to see the Morrigan go for that. Meanwhile, Lasbra was dealing with Cyclone, and that Magi's Cloak prevented a huge impale the Cyclone found there to allow him to just keep him busy and unable to do anything in the fight. Now, Benji, forced to defend the FG alone. He's got Paul nearby with space and time. That's what he was trying to get vision of. Luckily, Aurora's back, but the no escapes there.
Oh, the beads get used early by Benji, and Awesome Jake will use the ultimate. That buys enough time for the Bolts to secure the FG, and finally Benji goes down. Scary D into the Ragnarok brings King Arthur towards the backline. That's right where Haddix wants to be anyway, and so it's a quiet secure there for the Olympus Bolts. Couple minutes away from enhanced. All 5 members of the Olympus Bolts have this FG buff. Benji's down for 45 seconds. Plenty of pushing to be done.
And Haddix doesn't really care at this point in time with how he is. You were excited about that. I was like, no.
I saw him saddle up and I was ready.
However, that left-hand Phoenix came back to haunt him a little bit there for Titans because it did take a ton of damage from the minions after their tier 2 was taken down.
It did.
So it's already at half health here. And Bolts have a lot they could really do at the moment. The gold lead is definitely favoring them. Gold's still important at the moment. No one at 6 items just yet. And with that gold now going in their favor a little bit more so, it's going to be an interesting engage of where the Bolts initiate from, because really it is a lot of people leaping in.
Yep.
And wouldn't be surprised if Venenu's one to start things off and maybe transform back out afterwards.
Yeah, it was an interesting kind of rotation there from Venenu. I honestly forgot he was still around at the back end of that Fire Giant fight, because he had just scrapped with Scary D, largely won it, and then out of nowhere Morgan just kind of stumbles on in towards the back end of that fight. So now you got plenty of time if you're the Olympus Bolts. Mid lane and left side Phoenix is left open, so it's a fantastic scenario where you can try to secure this Phoenix on the left, then rotate on over to mid if that's what you're looking towards. Are you feeling confident though, Hindu Man, in the ability of this Tartarus Titans lineup in defending their base?
They definitely have the ability, especially with through space and time always being available. It's always something to look out for. That hits 2-3 people, it'll wash a fight, at least for a few minutes sometimes, and then maybe even turn it in your favor. And when you've got the front line that you do in this game, that could really swing heavily back if you're careful about it. Just keep an eye on Venenu as well, because he has picked up a Polynomicon next too, so his damage output, you've got to be a little bit high if you get to one of these squishy targets in the back line. I will say, I think they've done a very good job so far times of trying to protect Cyclone and Paul a little bit more so. Paul, though, has been a bit awkward in these fights. He's having a hard time finding enough time to get his damage off and stay safe. His 1 kill so far really was that 1v1 after a failed Fire Giant on that left-hand side where he finds the kill against Gilga. For the most part, he's very much utility-focused.
And he just had to use his ultimate a few seconds ago here, and it was just Olympus Bolts walking towards that Yana, so it feels good now if you're the Bolts. You're not going to have that sudden burst and rotation from the rest of the Tartarus Titans, but the Tartarus Titans showing up to this left-hand side. No way they let this one go quietly, as Haddix quietly does start tanking up the Phoenix just a bit.
Don't be surprised to see Haddix stepping up. He's got no blink, so he should be the one eating the damage early on.
That's right.
Allow his backliners with those blinks to look for the engage. Jake specific is the call out, and Magi's Cloak online for Jake too. Makes it very tricky to peel him away from you. May see a couple of beads or ultimates force if Jake can get a good blink off it.
What a call from Hindu Man, the Chair 2 mastermind, as Jake blinks on in, forces 0 sets of beads with that ultimate just yet, but the Tartarus Titans fighting back in an effective manner. This fight is split out. Scary Deacon in his health bar missing as the rest of the Olympus Bolts working in under the left side. Phoenix, it's a big double pushback from Benji through space and time. Back up from Paul, but it's not enough, and the left side Phoenix goes down.
Double bees just used there after that portal as well, so maybe there's a chase on, and Cyclone senses it. Has he got a pillar available to slow him down? Paul wrapping around through the jungle right now. Call seems to be from Titans, though, to stay back. They realize that Bolt's like, wait a second, we're actually okay here. We've still got some relics up. Let's go again.
That's right, and Paul doesn't have that through space and time again. It was that second wind in that fight where there was a moment where maybe the Titans had an opening, but that's all by the wayside. The closest ultimate's halfway there. Haddix has his ultimate here, but still building up a little bit for the Olympus Bolt. But with 10 seconds left on the FG, they'll be happy with the left-hand side. They'll back away, spend up some of that gold, and we're looking towards Fire Giant here in a minute.
Yeah, that rotation to mid there, you could hear that. You could almost tell the Bolts were like, hey, how's our relic situation? Pretty good. Okay, who's engaging? Well, I ain't got anything up,
I got
you know? I mean, I guess I could blink in, Haddix is saying, but I might have to be the only initiator. So instead, better safe than sorry. 10k gold lead, though, Dave. I mean, you're feeling pretty comfortable at the moment with how this one's going for them. Scrappy game, though. Scrappy game. Paul's been off with a couple of those through space and times, but at the same time, that's the risk-reward of the through space and time ultimate from Giannis. If you hit it, it could change the game. If you miss it, you could look a little bit off.
That's right, and luckily the unstable vortex is enough to provide Paul a big chunk of damage here so far in this game. But the through space and time team utility, ever so important, as well as the damage utility that it provides. Venenu has quietly put together a 4-0-5 performance on this Morgan here. Feels like in all of these fights, there's just kind of one important skirmish that he's been able to find. Big burst of damage there with Soul Gem and Polynomicon. Scary D, how many times have we seen this? Ragnarok used defensively the last 3 times maybe I've seen it on the map.
Yeah, has to be used defensively, and that not being available every time is a crutch point for Titans of where the engage can come from now. Is this a Fire Giant defense from Titans? I'd argue this is worth defending at the moment and look for the fight. It's a scrappy battle with how these engagements are gone. Anyone could strip it away because there's not a whole ton of burst secure on either side.
Yeah, Paul is on the map, so if I'm the Tartarus Titans, I'm at least stepping up somewhere within range, but Scary D does not have the ability to get out of this fight. He's pulled back in, will leap away and survive just for a little while longer. Yamoja Sustain doing all the legwork here for the Tartarus Titans, but the collapse from the bolts is swift, and it is on its way as Haddix finds one with his ultimate through space and time. Flies on through the Tartarus Titans roster here to leap away from Cyclone Spin in the Olympus Bolts. Now maybe caught out as Ragnarok comes back up. Haddix dashes away, and there's just not enough damage, but Scary D with the brutalize. Oh no! He tried to bite off just a little bit too much, and down he goes.
Meanwhile, the Titan, that's going down too. The Fire Minions causing a huge problem for the Titans on defense, and Bolts might just feel they could go for the Fire Giant still. I don't think they'll be too happy with health bars. This could be a bit of a bait situation too. Haddix around the corner, and Jake walking up too.
Haddix not worried about his health bar at the moment. Aurora maybe should be though. Paul receives a little burst of healing. A nice stun onto Aurora, who uses the beads, and he will walk away, but you can't say the same for Cyclone Spin. Now the on her off the map for the next 60 seconds should be a good FG for the Olympus Bolts. Paul with something a little extra in mind there. Will have through space and time for this contest if he wants. Olympus Bolts down somewhat low here. Paul could make a play.
But Lasper on the hunt, and Lasper's going to spot Paul in the jungle. Last time this happened, Paul did win. But space and time is still going. Here we go. It's too early, I think. I can't see the health bar. Not going to do enough.
Just a bit too early, but Paul following up on those portals. It's a last-ditch effort to give the Tartarus Titans a steal. Aurora stole plenty of kills, but no FG this time around, and the Olympus Bolts get it on all 5 in this one. This one is enhanced. There's a left side Phoenix looking low, and Hindu, the Titan being as low as it is, you got to fight outside of your base now if you're the Titans, you imagine.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it in the last game with Scarabs and the Kings, too. You saw how quickly the Titan falls against Enhanced Fire Giant at this stage of the game. They could rush through an end. I was going to ask for Titans to get up a better defense this time around, have them initiate, don't wait for Bolts. But with 2 members dead, they won't get a choice. They're going to have to try and defend on their own.
No Paul for 30 seconds. The Olympus Bolts in a fantastic spot to secure their first seed. Little to no damage, though, going into the front lines of the Tartarus Titans here. It's a right side Phoenix siege going somewhat well as Barracuda slowly plugging damage into the Phoenix. He will rocket himself away from the fight, turns tail, and tries to rejoin the fray. He's found the stun onto Benji. The right side Phoenix falls.
And with that, the Bolts can just march on if they want, but they don't need to. Look at the health bars too, by the way. FG just going to keep rejoining them anyway. Fall back towards mid. Why make a mistake? I do hate saying that, but it is the truth. Like, they could try and push for an end, but we've seen so many games where teams go into the Titan room going, we got this in the bag, and throw it all away and bring it back to an even
I've seen a lot of those this year, haven't we?
Too many. Too many.
Lots of back. It's fun to cast. It's fun to watch. I imagine it's not fun to lose games like that. You feel, though, this is the last bit of insurance policy, going back, buying up those final items, buying up some of the power pots for the Olympus Bolts here. Left side Phoenix down, right side Phoenix down if you really want to make sure you siege a mid lane Phoenix here if you're the Olympus Bolts. But my eyes are still on that Titan health, especially with Barracuda at the stage of the build that he is at. Gone a little bit of crit on the back end of it. And this Titan, if it's collapsed on by all members of the Bolts, likely falls quickly. If you really want to make sure, I guess you can grab an Oni Fury as well with the Fire Minions.
Not a terrible idea from Titans here, though, Dave, to actually step up towards this Fury on the side.
Have to.
For them to get into a fight here, if they take it in their base, they lose. We know that. What they need to do is try and get a fight in the jungle. And Bolts recognize there could be a pick potential. So we're sitting back. Why do we need to push? We've got right-hand Fire Minions slowly trickling down. And as soon as we see someone turn up there, we can take a fight 4v5. We're just going to avoid the Giannis ultimate if it's him that goes back.
Well, Ven and Barra don't have their beads. That's important to look at. Paul 20 seconds away from his Cyclone Spin with both active. So if the Bolts are able to delay this fight, look, you know, they're not pushing too far forward. They realize their carries are without beads for the next half of a minute or so, and there's still a minute and a half left on the FG buff. So calculated play from the Olympus Bolts, buying some time for just this, where Paul's going to have to rotate over, deal with the Fire Minions on the right. Through space and time will allow him to somewhat quickly
ping straight away.
Rejoin the rest of this fight.
As soon as Giannis spotted, ping got the Fury, and straight away the Bolts initiate. Jake steps in to try and slow down Aurora, and Benji's here, but watch out for Venenu. Always hunting, looking for Scary, won't find him here. Aurora, though, just being focused and tanking it all so far.
That's his through space and time that gets used, so the Giannis will walk on in from the back line of this fight. Scary D, Ragnarok defensively. How many times have you heard me say that so far this game? Aurora's River's Rebuke crashes on down as Haddock's down beneath about 25% HP here, but Barracuda around the left-hand side doing damage over onto Benji. Aurora the first to go down as Cyclone Spin trades out one onto Lasbra. Benji will use the beads, stay in this fight a little bit longer. 1-for-1 trade, support for jungle.
It was a team effort from Bolts this game, Dave, but Veneni's been the standout. This Morrigan play has been fantastic.
508.
It's so hard when the Morrigan's playing well, you can't find her in the engagements, but more importantly, she's turned into another tanky target that can frontline as well. It's a goon squad coming down, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh man, this fight is being brought to the Titan room, and the Olympus Bolts feel they like their odds underneath the Titan, and the Olympus Bolts will take game 1 in 38 minutes.
Fantastic work from the Bolts there. It was a bit of a back and forth encounter, which we expected today with how the standings were. But more importantly, the Bolts have guaranteed themselves that #1 spot, and the rest of the games, we'll get to have some fun maybe. I don't know if the teams know that though, so maybe they'll play to the same sort of level as that one.
Yeah, I'm worried about the Bolts when there's nothing on the line, right? I mean, they've stepped up to the plate this year consistently in these big games. Now they're first seed out of this group no matter what, so maybe we have some fun here in game number 2, which we will get to right after this.
welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. And cat's out of the bag here, Gore, on game number 1. Unfortunately, wasn't enough to actually find the victory over the Olympus Bolts. Where do you think things really started to take a turn for the worse for the Titans?
Well, maybe you go back to the last pick and ban segment that Morgan gets locked in. That's probably the start of it. At least, like if you trace it back to the true origin, right? Like it feels like there's a rupture, and then it's happens to be a pretty decent early game back and forth for the Titans and the Bolts. It happens not even around the fire gen. There was a point where Bera actually used this rocket to try and go for an FG. Maybe that Gold Fury steal, but I think even later on, it's still going in favor of the Titans. It's just one good fight in the Fire Giant pit that starts everything for the Bolts. We get Jake, we get Vin, just playing out of their damn minds. Same thing for Haddix as well. All three of them just lights out for the latter half of this game.
And unfortunately for the Titans, there were definitely some instances where you could see the power behind that Yamoja and Fenrir really start to shine. Paul as well, putting in work on the Giannis, even finding a really nice 1v1 up against Lasbra. Sadly, just not enough to actually seal the deal on game number 1. Do you imagine that the Titans are still going to allow Venenu to run back this Morgan pick, though?
Honestly, probably not. They banned out the Chiron. Like, Ymir Sobek makes sense. Medusa Merlin. Maybe you could swap out the Medusa, although Bera's been liking that a lot. But granted, I mean, I don't think this was the end-all, be-all. This Danzaburo was 4-3 and 6. It was all right. I think you could probably just throw Bera on any hunter there and have a similar performance. So maybe you can let the Medusa through and ban out the Morgan. I think that trying to control Vin seems like your easiest avenue. I mean, he did almost the most damage in the game,
but
most on his team.
Look at Paul. Man is on a level of his own there with the player damage stats. Nearly 35,000 even, and it still was not enough here, Gore. I really like the idea, though, behind the Giannis. It's clear that Paul has a great fundamental understanding of how to best utilize the portals and just the mobility overall for his team. However, I did feel as though there was a little bit too much stress put onto Scary with that Fenrir pick selection, and it also seemed extremely predicted by the Bolts.
Yeah, I think that was something that they were able to again, it was not good into the Ares, but the Bolts were just able to handle it pretty well. Raven and Fenrir had been treating the Titans really well in the jungle up to this point. I think both of them had a very high success rate, if not 100%. It was up in the 80s, 90s area, and so seeing them kind of recognize that, okay, Scary's got a little bit of a go-to. If we can deal with one of them and make it just hell for the other one. Like, Raven isn't going to get anything accomplished in that team comp. Fenrir can come in, but unfortunately wasn't able to find anything, like you said, because of the Ares and everything that was going on. The Bolts limiting the jungle made their lives a lot easier.
So what kind of adjustment would you like to see for the Tartarus Titans moving into game number 2? Because, again, we did see that initial focus with the Chiron ban. Personally, I thought that may have been thrown in a little bit too soon.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a ban that they maybe could have reserved for a little bit later on. Then again, Bolts have had a tendency to work into that Chiron for their compositions. But what kind of adjustments would you like to see?
That's so weird because, like you said, like I want it. Like Chiron first ban just feels like it should go down a little bit in terms of priority, but it is one of those picks that, well, Venenu played it last week, Bera played it last week, Bera I think might have played it earlier this week. I'd have to go double check, and so it is a double ban in that regard. But you're still letting through. I look to the King Arthur, I look at this Morgan. I'm like, man, I really wish I could control Haddix a little bit, just a little bit. But I also wish I could control Venenu. And I'm wondering if it's worth letting Jake have something. He's like, if he's got his Ares, Ymir and Sobek bans aren't controlling him and locking him down. Maybe you try to get some of those other members of the Bolts onto at least something different, if not completely changing up their strategy.
Maybe some Gilgamesh priority for the Titans as opposed to first selecting that Giannis like they did in game 1. But as far as controlling Haddix is concerned, that seems to be a consistent problem for just about every team right now in the league.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that is had to be looked at before next week for everybody. What do we do? How do we stop him? How do we slow him down? And the other thing I'm wondering, and this is something like we kind of glanced over it, it caught me off guard, but the Bolts banned Vamana last game. And I'm wondering where, why, and how. Like, I'm wondering if the Titans have something going for them, or if they really have something they didn't want to deal with there.
Scary is just a menace, I think, in the jungle, because having originally come from solo, he definitely has a strong understanding of how to adapt some of these warrior unconventional picks into the jungle role. Vamana, I think, just providing a little bit too much flexibility to the Titans roster as a whole, because it's a pick that I think Benji could flex into the solo lane, or again, like I already mentioned, something that Scary is surely well versed in and understands how to pilot, and I think it would have also posed a lot of issues for that Morgan early on. So seems as though Titans still wanting to have that preference for Paul. Can't blame them either. Even though I was hoping for a possible Gilgamesh adjustment, I still really like seeing this Paul in Paul's hand, or pick in Paul's hands.
Yeah, I mean, what, he did 10,000-ish damage more than anybody else in the game. Even if you lose, that's incredible. And that's a good reason to go back to. Yeah, I think doubly so because he lost. So yeah, Paul wasn't necessarily the problem. I like that they're scooping that up. I was wondering, they locked in the Gilgamesh. Last time it was King Arthur Gilgamesh. I was kind of expecting the same, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, but they take away that Yemoja.
Yemoja being swiped away from Aurora, almost curious to see if Aurora's response might be to lean into that Fafnir, although Giannis Kokolin, maybe not the most ideal pieces to be surrounded by that Fafnir. However, the fact that is, Fafnir introduces a lot of objective control, and that is something that I think the Titans were sorely missing in Game 1.
And it opens up the conversation, like those bottom two picks are a lot more open now than what they could have been. Yeah, like even if you were able to get a Yemoja there, it felt like they were a little more pigeonholed into certain picks last game, whereas now Fafnir makes it a little easier. I mean, Chiron's banned, but he's a good example where it's like, hey, he could suddenly flourish. I think a couple of carries are going to be able to flourish in this lane now and make Aurora look really good.
Medusa, however, might become a hot commodity here in this set. Both Barracuda and Cyclone Spin certainly not foreign to piloting that Hunter pick, and I think she plays really nicely into the Fafnir as well. Kokolin having that knock-up set up could be really nice for the Petrify combination. And the Merlin switch up for Venenu, this is a pick that we have oftentimes seen him lean into.
Yeah.
Why do you think he's choosing to prioritize it now?
Honestly, it just feels like it's going maybe to go against that Fafnir control around objectives, right? You want something that's going to match the burn. Merlin does it best. And if they're going to target out someone in that ban phase, Merlin Morgan seems like a really easy 2 bans for the Titans there if they don't grab their mid. So I like the fact that they scoop it up early. I think it fits well with Yemoja and Gilgamesh as of so far. And it really does limit what they're going to try and ban here. Because, I mean, are you going to try to ban out Barra? Like, that's not going to necessarily work. So, yeah, I like the fact that they're aiming a little more towards Haddix. Because as of right now, he has been the one, I think, alongside Vin and, well, actually, all of them, I guess, really. The bolts have just all been popping off in the right times. And it's just so good to see some control maybe going towards that solo lane.
And Medusa going to be swiped away there for Barracuda. No chance for Cyclone to have that Medusa alongside of the Fafnir. So dual lane control could go either direction right now, Gore. Yemoja, Medusa, that's definitely a strong push factor during that early laning phase. But Scary now leaning into this Camazotz. How do you expect the Bat to fare into the current lineup from the Bolts?
Man, he's going to survive and be safe. I'll get to that one in a minute. Just looking at this, he should live. He should be fine. He might even be able to get away with some kills.
Freya is... wow. I'm honestly shocked that Cyclone... This is an all-in type of composition in my eyes, though, Gore, because Freya does not leave much room, if any, for a mistake. This is going to come down to a pretty much flawless execution, but when you combine the Freya alongside of the Fafnir, and even just thinking about her ultimate, there is a lot of power in this pick if the Titans can make it through that early laning phase.
Yeah, I mean, late game potential with Freya is one of the most insane. Like, no one wants to box her. You don't want to fight her. You don't want to let her get there. You add a coerce into the equation, and it is maybe one of the most frightening combos and damage dealers that you could have in this game. But there is a lot of weight on the late game portion of, like, a lot of the items, at least last year, that were making Freya look good and a lot of the other magical carries look good aren't as good early on anymore. You don't have your what was it, Rings of Akate anymore at the level 5, level 6 that are going to just absolutely set you up. They're still going to be good for you, but it's going to take more time.
I think the discussion around Freya and what makes her such an interesting pickup here is she's always had that competitive viability. The argument could be posed for just about any hunter when it comes to just what kind of composition do you want to plug and play. Freya, though, can definitely still prosper with the rings build. You just have to be a little bit more mindful about your position. And well, not a little, very mindful about where you're positioning. But seeing that Osiris locked in here, do you feel as though this Freya pick might have just kind of put too much stress onto the Titans in terms of trying to protect Cyclone Spin? Because Gilgamesh, Yamoja, Osiris, that just screams carries die here every time.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of easy dive into the backline. I mean, Osiris is even going to come through. Like, you can start the conversation about his sustain control that is there for Camazotz, but he's the god of slows. At least that's how I've been looking at him lately. And the fact that Freya is going to be forced to use a banish on him, probably forced to use some relics to get away from it. The minute those fights start, like, Cyclone is going to have to be the president, and everyone else is the security service. They are going to have to block anything from getting back there. He cannot be in danger, or else it's all going to crumble.
I suppose one silver lining for this Freya, though, is when you think about survivability, I'm not sure that any god can do it better than Giannis, and Paul on
True.
top of that, probably one of the most mindful mids that we have actually seen in our pro league. I think that Paul's map awareness could definitely come into play pretty heavily here for Cyclone.
Yeah, and honestly, this is maybe a weird take for it, but maybe Cyclone's the sacrificial lamb. Be so scared of Freya,
True.
Go for Freya. Let Paul get all his damage off for free. Let Camazotz run for free. Like, if they're so focused on one of these targets, the other two can really flourish. And it kind of works anyway, like, as long as they can diversify it. If they make Giannis seem way too big a target and they have to go all in on him, or same thing for Camazotz, Freya gets to pop off in those occasions, so it makes things a little spicier for the Titans.
Well, certainly curious to see how this Freya matchup lines up for the Tartarus Titans as they look to keep their playoff seeding in control. Dolson, Hindeman, rest is up to you.
And with all that on the line, Freya is where we go, Hindu man. And I think Wormy tweeted, Freya in 2021, what world are we living in?
Listen, this is the right opportunity for Titans to play around a little bit, and Cyclones had Freya in his gut pull for a while. I think, sadly, the last time I remember Cyclone playing Freya was not a great performance, which was a World Championship a while ago. That's the last time I can really remember off the top of my head. I mean, the one thing that I like about this Titans roster this time, it's very hard to pick any of them off. However, if you do get hold of one by the scruff of the neck, they're in trouble. But you've got the Bad Out of Hell and Scary D, so we can escape danger. Freya can use the Valkyrie's discretion. Paul can just dip through a wall. And you've also still got Fafnir, so who's your target? Kakullen? I'm pretty sure Benji will be okay with being the target if that's the case. That's best case scenario.
Yeah, it feels good if that's how it works out for the Tartarus Titans. The Olympus Bolts have the ability to maybe lock down some of those targets between Lasbra and Haddix. A bit of a different look in the solo lane. Won't be King Arthur against Kakullen this time. Don't worry, I'll avoid asking too much about that. Because
you can ask me about this, but it's different now.
Is there a world, realistically though,
Yeah.
is this just what we should expect the solo lane meta to be for a while? Like maybe a gank once every few games, but by and large, we're just kind of chilling over there?
I think for the most part, once upon a time, we used to have we now and again still see it where the first blood could happen in the first couple of minutes.
Every once in a while.
But outside of that, someone will relinquish pressure or junglers will gank, and generally, you're looking at junglers. But the first two levels is where it's all at for the most part of who is getting dominance. And Osiris, pretty good in that early game.
Yeah, Haddix already doing some good damage on over to Benji, who has to back away in this lane. A slight lead as he will take the first totem of coup.
I think one thing for Haddix this game to play the balancing act of his magical versus physical defense as well. Just because it's Freya and Giannis this game, and that's a balance point itself, but also maybe a bit of anti-heal as the game goes on, because Freya's passive on its own is all about lifesteal and sustain, so I want to keep an eye on where Cyclone's build goes, and you can see he did start off rushing those boots, those shoes of the Magi, which gives you lifesteal in itself anyway. And as the game goes on, Freya gets a little bit more lifesteal. I believe it's 15% off a passive alone by level 20. And if you add in all the other lifesteal items, like the Typhon's Fang, you know, a few of those rings, she can swing like a truck if someone runs her.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to get there, though. Barracuda is going to feel okay here in this lane for the time being. Maybe that's why you see Awesome Jake making an early rotation on over towards mid, where, that said, we've already seen what Fafnir plus Sunder. Granted, it was the upgraded Sunder that we saw earlier on, the immediate evaporation of one of the hunters over here in the duo lane with Fafnir there. So there is a threat to Barracuda, but with the acid spray and all that sort of fun stuff, Barracuda likely able to sit back, farm up a little bit, and that'll be interesting to see how Jake is able to capitalize on some of that, maybe rotate over for a purple buff.
Yeah, you can see Aurora sticking around in this duel lane quite a while longer than what Jake's doing. This is giving Paul more farming mid lane over Venenu to get him to hit level 5 a little bit quicker, but it's also protecting Cyclone Spin in this early game. Let him get level 5 online sooner rather than later with protection and then leave him alone. But purple invade from Bolts, very well done. Good idea.
Lasbra here on the Gilgamesh. Purple buff gets dropped on down. Aurora getting drop kicked against the wall. He'll have to leap away, but Lasbra right there on the follow-up. Olympus Bolts will grab first blood. Scary D brawling out now, but Olympus Bolts, they have 3 in this fight as Barracuda dashes forward. Root Cyclone Spin in place. No retreat for the fray. But Paul rotates in, but it's a double kill for Lasbra through space and time. No good. It's a 2-for-1 trade, it looks like, on the back end, but Barracuda in danger.
Yeah, Barra really in danger. No beads, remember, here either, so he might just have to turn and fight. Instead, jukes him around the jungle, but all the while, Veneni was pinned under his tier 1. He's hoping for backup here, Barra, if anything, but he realizes his jungler's dead, his support's dead, and his mid laner, all he could do was farm.
Wasn't even all that long of an engagement there. There was a chance for maybe Jake to rotate in towards the end with how low the death timers are, but the good news is, for either side, maybe if you're the Bolts, you come out a little bit shorthanded there on that engagement. You're still in control, thanks to that first blood bounty that you got over there on your side. Tartarus Titans able to fight their way right on back in, and it's great for the Titans as well that Paul is the one who benefits to a couple of kills there, feeling himself early on here in this game on this Giannis. A couple kills in that engagement, and later, what was it, post-game stats after game 1, even in a loss, Paul was able to do 30-something thousand damage on this pick. I think that shows the strength a little bit, even missing some through spaces and times.
And just to
be burst damage is there.
Just to be clear as well, with Paul in mid lane, sometimes there's an idea that Paul doesn't do enough rotations at certain moments in the game. That one was very early, like just hitting 5 and he's rotating into that. If Paul doesn't turn up there, that goes completely to the side of the Bolts. Because unfortunately, with what happened there, Scary D couldn't do much on a Camazot's early game to protect Aurora, who was trying to defend the buff. What's Freya and Camazot's going to do against 3 there with the amount of CC and control there is? Nothing. And so the Giannis turn-up actually allowed that to be less painful for the Titans than it really could have been.
And Cyclone Spin had to use his beads just a few seconds into that engagement. So it could have been definitely a lot worse there for the Titans. You wonder now if there's the ability to capitalize in onto this beadsless Freya now, who does have the ultimate, can disengage from this fight. Barracuda and Jake realizing that maybe the capitalization is rotating in towards this purple buff as Aurora will leap on in, won't steal it away, and Barracuda and Jake continue to find pressure on the left side of the map. But this is expected, right? This is what the Titans kind of accepted, picking up this Freya.
Exactly, and that's one thing where we always talk about pressure in these lanes of what that results in. These purple invades consistently left-hand side is because of the matchup. Fafnir Freya will not outclear your Mojo and Medusa in the early stages. What you're looking to do is weather the storm of the early game and get to a midpoint and go, okay, we're not too far behind.
Right, and as of right now, the Tartarus Titans certainly not too far behind, almost even, you'd say.
But you're also hoping for a bit of an advantage elsewhere to make up for this, and I think you've seen that on the solo side a little bit more at the moment. Especially with Scary D trying to get greedy in the jungle. He's got to be careful about his positioning.
Haddox blinks right on through. Scary D forced into the bat out of hell, and some of the slipperiness we've discussed about the Titans comes out to play here. Barracuda takes down some good damage on the Cyclone Spin, gets slowed down, then stunned by Awesome Jake. And this is all just the Bolt sensing that Scary D is over on the right-hand side of the map. We have the opportunity to find a bit more aggression over here on the left. So Cyclone Spin pushed back once more. But now Scary D rotating in. This is where you have to be careful if you're the Bolt. You can't overstay too long.
Yeah, funny enough, Lasper's picked up 2 kills in this game. I know we've not really spoken about it much, but that rotation to Juro did make an impact for him as well. And he's continued to farm up the jungle now and get aggressive himself towards his speed buff. Bad news is he doesn't know about it, but look at this left-hand side.
Aurora jumps on in, finds the hammer, transforms as well. Awesome Jake throws up the River's Rebuke, dancing between it, but Scary D will pick up the kill nonetheless. Now 2-0-2 for the Camazots out of the jungle. Barracuda just trying to stop the back here. And a great rotation from Scary D. That Fenrir fell by the wayside, you feel like, in game number 1. We're diving tier 1 towers here, 7 minutes in. Barracuda will dash away. All the aggro getting reset here, and it's juggled well. Cyclone Spin finds the kill, and all the Titans survive.
And you said it there yourself, clearly. Juggled well, but Paul in trouble in the jungle here. Needs some help, has to escape the winds of Shamash. And that's the slipperiness of this Titans team. But going back to that duo side, yeah, Aurora realizing that with Scary D, he can juggle the aggro. Great little work out of him. Takes some time to bring him down, but All the while, I think the biggest key was they knew exactly where everybody was outside of Scary D was the problem.
Yep.
Because Scary D should have been at his speed buff there.
He should have. He immediately rotated over to the left-hand side just now. Goes back and picks up that speed buff. So both junglers have played a bit of an impact so far here on this game. Scary D, 5 out of 5 affected kills. Olympus Bolt's jungler Lasbra, he's got 2 out of 2 kills over in his back pocket. Cyclone Spin and Aurora now may be comfortable enough with just Jake there to finally secure a purple buff for themselves. And that's like best case scenario, isn't it? That this Freya gets a kill early on here in this game, a few assists in the back pocket. I mean, as long as you're not behind, I think you're feeling okay. And she's dead even with what should have been a tough lane here. But still will be plenty of pressure applied, and the Olympus Bolts can maybe regrow a bit of that lead in the next few minutes.
Yeah, it will just be this case for the time being until we get to the team fight stage. But you can already see Titan's composition working as intended now. Yeah. They're very slippery as a squad to try and pick anybody apart. It's the early stages where they would struggle. And so his Bolts kind of probably forcing a couple of fights now is what they want to do. And taking that Scorpion there on the left tells me they're going to look for a Gold Fury or two a little bit earlier on.
They do have that opportunity with the way that this Medusa starts to power spike. We'll get towards that Transcendence here shortly. Trying to secure up the Oracles here. Cyclone Spin and Barracuda will plug some shots at one another, but there's still a skirmish happening over by the purple buff. It's Lasbra caught out, and it's Paul on a killing spree. Just shy of 9 minutes into the game, Awesome Jake will Riptide his way away as the Bat Out of Hell times out and Scary D down to the ground. Barracuda weaves some damage in onto the left-hand side, but it looks like a 1-for-none. Titans on top.
Or is it? Because Aurora went back in again. These transforms in the worst possible time. He'll get picked apart. But it is a 1-for-1 as Barracuda lacerated in there for the kill. Didn't realize the rest of the squad was still going to be around from Titans. So at the end of the day, Aurora's kind of happy with that, if I'm honest.
Wow, Cyclone Spin is just bought his re-engage timing so well, hasn't he? Where it feels like these last 2 kills have been with that Valkyrie's discretion when some target on the bolts is low enough. And so the Freya, I think, playing that early game, maybe lack of power, pretty well here. So 2-1-3 for Cyclone Spin, a level lead over Barracuda even. Venenu on the Merlin, trying to play a bit of a role here. A 1-level lead despite Paul being 3-0-2. Paul going to do some chunky damage here. If Ven doesn't flicker away, we'll get portaled on down, but not enough damage there for the follow-up.
You heard me go, ooh, because there was 2 blinks in the jungle just off the camera there where you saw Lasbra blinking towards that red, trying to catch that low health Scary D, but Scary D responded with a blink of his own. Haddix, though, under some pressure with Aurora coming in.
I spoke too soon. Maybe there is some... Nope. Maybe there is some action over in the solo lane. Aurora shows his face.
Yeah, Benji didn't trust that hammer was going to connect, but also he didn't have anything further to really follow up with that engagement. But we saw the method to the madness, so to speak.
He sure did, as Venenu and Paul continue to brawl out here in the mid lane. I think that's a pretty big boon to Venenu's cause here, the fact that he's been able to keep even level-wise after Paul has found the success that he has so far. But Benji and Aurora chopping away at the health bars of the Olympus Bolts. Lasbra jumps on into the backline. Looks like should be a pick here on the Benji, who transforms at the perfect time, but Scary D portals his way on in as it through space and time opens up the door, and Aurora slams it shut on Lasbra. Tartarus Titans with another pick.
I was interested by the target selection there by the Bolts because they went straight in on Benji, but a great rotation, honestly, a call I would say from Venenu with that space and time coming through where they back away. Sure, they lose Lasbra, but that could have gone way worse for the Bolts there if they weren't careful with that Giannis ultimate coming through and the extra members of support, so the damage isn't as bad, but Titans are starting to get a grasp of this game so far.
They are, and it's Scary D and Paul, the 1-2 punch of damage that's been there, and then Cyclone Spin capitalizing on a couple kills as well. How do you cast a support fight? I mean, that's just way too long, right? If those two just stuck around and went toe-to-toe, there's just no way you... Because you had the 1v1 the other day.
I did,
and that was rapid and chaotic, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
We don't often get those either, to be honest, those straight-up 1v1s in the late game. But they're fun when they happen, but support ones generally don't really happen.
Yeah, I think if Jake and Aurora had stuck around there, then actually brawled out, the cast would have been a learning experience for me, to be sure, because that's a long drawn-out fight, but not to happen.
I'm trying to think on paper who would win that one if they were even level too.
Aurora had, maybe if Sunder was off cooldown, maybe it would have felt better.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling Aurora might win that engagement just based off abilities and running out of Omni. It's a crazy one. I don't know why you're forcing me in that situation, but I do think Fafnir should win.
I want to see it now. Can somebody get Aurora and Jake on the line and tell them we want to brawl? No, Lasbra, get out of here. Lasbra drop kicks Aurora, makes the 1v1 a 2v1 in the back line. Venenu being looked at by Benji, a flicker away from the knockup, and the Merlin survives just for a little bit longer. Awesome Jake will have to use the River's Rebuke and will walk away for the time being, finds a stun, but Aurora dashes right on back.
Pinch.
And a collapse coming in from the Olympus Bolts over onto the left-hand side as Lasbro leaps away from Cyclone Spin. The Valkyrie's discretion used and canceled. Big ultimate off the board.
Yeah, Cyclone using that
they go back in.
defensively could force Titans back for a second, but Benji's doing well here on the backline. Again, he already forced the issue on Ben and then onto Barra too.
And Barracuda goes down for it. Awesome Jake, no health. Naomi left, but look at Lasbro looking for the 3v1, immediately sent up to the sky, but don't find the kill. Nonetheless, Cyclone's been piloting this Freya so well. Benji rotates in to the tune of a double kill, but Merlin now back in this fight. Plenty of health, plenty of mana, but not plenty of movement speed, and the Titans would get away with one.
And I've not spoken about the builds yet, but it was a hasten ring for Cyclone here, so that extra mobility coming into the fray is allowing him to reposition effectively, or continue a chase even, and keep some of these characters at distance. For example, Osiris, who wants to run you down with the slows.
Yep.
If you can just keep poking him out and keeping him at distance, that's really useful, but it does come at the cost of losing some power. However, you don't give damage if you're dead, Dave, so, you know, even if you're doing less damage, at least you survive.
You sure don't. Barracuda's learned that the hard way this game. Third to highest still on the damage charts. That said, 0-4 and 3, so it's been tough sledding for the Medusa, to say the least. Same for Lasbro as well, 3 and 4. Though we've seen this sometimes out of the Gilgamesh, where the kill impact is there, but the deaths are also high. It's like high kill, high death type gameplay.
Yeah.
Lasbro Brawler's beat stick. You mentioned some anti-heal might be important for this Bolt squad, and Lasbro's got some early.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit. It says Divine Ruin as well now online for Venenu. But look at this from Titans trying to extend their lead further, all grouped up around here on the left. And that was the one thing about this composition was targets. Who can they target in the engagement? Benji's going to run at the back line. And when you try and run at their back line, they're all going to do their best to scatter into the forest in different directions and through different means.
And it's worked out for the Titans here so far. 10-4 is the way the kills stand. About 2,000 gold in the lead as well. The Olympus Bolts, you figure, might have been a little bit more comfortable in the early game, at least over on the dual lane side. Cyclone Spin well on his way to scaling on this Freya. Paul definitely there as well. Chronos Pendant into Charon's coin. We'll feel pretty good on Paul there, because that's so often the conversation we have around this Giannis is when you squeeze some of that extra cooldown in there. And so getting the Chronos Pendant on, Charon's coin following up, that's a big power spike for Paul.
Yeah, especially because you're talking about multiple rotations of your abilities a little bit more often. And more importantly, I keep going back to the whole game plan of the team, which is scatter. You can't scatter as effectively if you've not got the portals available all the time. So Paul realizing that if Cyclone and Scary keep taking themselves out of combat, then he's going to be a focal target, so he needs to have that cooldown.
And he's had it. He's 3-0-3 so far here in this game. Bit of a back and forth over by the blue buff. Was a 2v2, now becomes a 3v2 as Awesome Jake walks on in, but you can never count Paul out of this fight. Can join and drop of a hat with that through space and time. Haddock's jumping away, low health on the Osiris, and the Bolts being bullied beneath their Tier 2 tower while Tier 1 still stands. Have to imagine this will be a Tier 1 confirmed now for the Titans.
That's a great play from Titans, though. They just dance around this right-hand side. Haddock's is caught in between a rock and a hard place there where he can't go back to lane. Scary D's closing the gap, forces his blink and his ultimate defensively. And that's all Bolts were looking for there, was to try and get Haddock's out of the danger zone he was in. And it came at the cost of quite a bit.
Haddock's does survive. Haddock's picks up the sprint here. Don't often see that over in the solo lane, but maybe enough rundown potential for the Tartarus Titans, or catch-up potential if the Titans are going to be running.
Yeah, there's also 4 slows on the team, too. I mean, Scary's got one, Paul's got one, Aurora's got one with that hammer, and then Cyclone Spin is slowing consistently, unless he uses that Irradiate. So, yeah, doesn't surprise me that getting rid of the slows is going to be impactful in this game.
That's a good pickup then for Haddock's. Let's see what Awesome Jake looks for. His second relic slot opens on up now, but we'll have to wait until this mid lane fighting comes to an end. As Aurora on the Fafnir has found himself a pretty good slash line so far, 1, 2, and 6. Fafnir has kind of come to the forefront of the support god pool here recently, hasn't it? It's been pretty quiet where, you know, we were going so long in Season 8, and then we came back after our break, and Fafnir's just been maybe the most highly prioritized support.
He got some cooldown changes as well. I mean, his hammer cooldown being changed, making it a bit quicker to get it off and have it back up more often. Same with his underhand tactics. So his hammer and his leap both up more often. Not only that, though, you see this play around less crit, more power on the Hunters. And that also leans into the fact of Coerce is really useful.
Yeah, Coerce feels good, especially with the Freya here.
Oh, yeah.
This game, Cyclone Spin has already been swinging, but now a couple rings into that build, and then 2/3 of the third is on its way. So you have to feel like the clock is starting to tick now for the Olympus Bolts if they aren't able to consistently find backline dive onto Cyclone Spin, which they found once in the early game, but There's a purple buff invade where Cyclone Spin was just a bit too far forward. Things have quieted down, though, over the last few minutes, Hindu Man, and we've gone back to a bit of a state of farming.
Yeah, for a little while. That's not really surprising to me because the Bolts realize they can't keep taking these skirmishes in the jungle for now. They're on Titans, Titans win almost at the moment, so they've got to slow that down and just hold out and farm up a little bit for the later stages. I think from Bolt's point of view here, my target selection is probably Paul. I'm probably aiming to get rid of the Giannis first. You can already see he's made a big impact already, 3-0 and 3 in this game. If they can take Giannis out or force the team to defend Giannis, they're going to leave other characters exposed or invest too much, and that's the way to really look for. And you can see Jake in the mid lane trying to cause some problems, but Paul, Juke Boots are online.
And he dodges out basically everything that awesome Jake throws his way. Mid lane tier 1 is gone on the Olympus Bolt side of the map, so that opens up more avenues for a bit of aggression if the Tartarus Titans look to find it. Primal Fury back up in about a minute, so that's maybe when you start to see this collapse over on the left-hand side. It's a flicker away from Venenu's. Aurora joins the fight, but it's just awesome Jake. Support fight, baby. Come on, turn around, Jake. I want to see this brawl happen. Venenu throws in a little bit of damage there. There is a Sunder online. The auto's connecting from awesome Jake, and Aurora backs away. He nearly died there. That was very close as Aurora. Look at the health bar there. It's a little bit lower than
He lost
Jake's.
in terms of health until he used Coerce himself and healed himself back up again. But he's winning the trade that's more important. He got one of those minions there. That was important.
That's right, that is important. The farm is important. Haddix, though, uses his ultimate to engage here in the mid lane as the River's Rebuke will divide Main Street right in half. Paul backing away with half of his health missing. Scary D will have to use Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah, I mean, he used it. I think he could have used it a little bit earlier or something, but now Benji's still stepping up forward. Lasma drops him, kicks him towards the team, but I don't think Bolts can find anything off this. This is an interesting time, though, because Bolts are grouping as 5 around the Fury spawn. We could get a fight, and especially with Scary D's ultimate being on cooldown here, that could be a good signal for them to look, hey, Camasots is susceptible to some damage now.
We'll have to keep our eyes on Haddix's ult and awesome Jake's ult as well, as Benji, maybe a bit caught out, but a beautiful portal by Paul slows down the aggression from the Olympus Bolt as the Fury does respawn. Through space and time, though, flies on in, and Paul through the portal, but immediately back out as the Giannis TKO'd from this engagement. Cyclone Spin, watch out for the Freya. Nobody's looking at the Freya.
No.
And Cyclone Spin up to the sky, finds the first execute, pouring down damage onto the backline as Haddix has got one himself as well. Lasbra now eating the auto attacks, and it's a double kill for Cyclone.
And not much Lasbra can do there. He tries to wrap around the back to help out his team, but Cyclone's in the air, so he's going to wait for him to land, and as soon as he does, he's with the rest of the squad. Beautiful engage from the Titans, though. Looks a little bit risky. I love the fact we saw Barry use that Petrify early to try and push them back, but this is just a run down using Kukulkan, as I expected.
Well, that's a banish onto Haddix that keeps this Osiris in a state of nervousness. Primal Fury getting taken down here, and it will get secured by the Tartarus Titans. 4-1-4 now for Cyclone Spin on this Freya. You love the aggression you see. It's that kind of flip that gets switched where Cyclone Spin's hanging back for a second and then walks forward and just starts absolutely wailing on the Olympus Bolts. And they have just not had an answer. Barracuda's 0-5, 0-2 for awesome Jake. Lasbra's the only one who's really gotten some kill value here so far, and I don't know, the answer might still be searched for here in the next few minutes.
I mean, the hardest thing to do as a hunter player or someone in the duel lane, so to speak, is to time when to go into an engagement. When's the right window for me to go in and try and get all the damage out I can?
Right.
And Frey's one of those that can really allow herself to do that with that discretion of that ultimate. But the problem is that you leave yourself susceptible. The way Titans have crafted this composition here, it makes it very difficult for Bolts to go, who is the focused target? And the only one that really presented as a target is Benji every time, and Benji is a man mounted on Kukulkan. Anyway, by his standard, we know he's one of the best in the world at playing this god. No surprises to see this one going the way it is so far.
Hey, he hasn't died yet, and he's been the one right in the thick of things with the Olympus Bolts. The Fire Giant, obviously still on the map here, and that's where the Tartarus Titans are going to look. Primal Fury will help them a little bit there in that regard, and Cyclone Spin hopefully able to build up some damage here for the team.
You can just see from the player damage, though, that like the Bolts are doing stuff in these engagements. There's 4 members in damage. But Freya, who's 4-1-4, well, you know what? All you got to do is get the killing blow. You only have to turn up and kill the carry. He's got 100 health left. Makes it a lot easier when, you know, the front line of Benji at 12k has been wailing away on them.
Yeah, I can't believe that the damage charts look the way they do, to be totally honest with you. Tartarus Titans all beneath everyone on the Olympus Bolts. Except for Lasbra, who's in the fray. Paul gets locked on in place. Aegis gets used, but Venenu finds the opening kill. And now some of that damage starting to find value for the Olympus Bolts, who are surging forward now. Scary D stunned on down. Bat Out of Hell will get triggered here, and the Olympus Bolts collapsing on backwards, trying to sense out the dropping point. But it's Paul who goes down for the first time this game.
Great pick, and that's what I was asking for, was take out the Giannis. It's the one susceptible if he's away from the walls, and they do so. And now bolts are on this FG. Next target will be Scary D if he comes in, or on to Cyclone. If Cyclone steps too far forward, he's going to be in danger here. Bolts are looking for a fight more than the FG.
Back on it is Barracuda just a little bit. It's a banish onto Lasbra as the Olympus Bolts reset the Fire Giant, but just for a moment. It's Jake and Barracuda completing the FG. Aurora walking around the side, no chance. A hammer steals this one, right? But Aurora waddling his way in. Scary D has finally gone down into the back line. The Fire Giant not fully reset as Aurora leaps away. Awesome Jake is low here, has to use some of that sustain to stay on in it, but Aurora, look how pesky this Fafnir is being. Fire Giant so low here, and the Olympus Bolt will secure the FG, and now the eyes have been turned towards Aurora, who does end up falling on the back end, and the Bolts juggle that fight so well, all 5 with the FG.
And Benji and Cyclone realize they've got to try and hunt the low health members here before they get back to tower. Can Cyclone Fire and Banish not is the answer there at the tail end. So that's exactly what Bolts needed to do. They needed to find a pick, they get Giannis, and then honestly, their decision-making in that engagement was really good from Bolts. They were patient. I felt like they were going to drop the FG when Aurora's in there causing so much damage to Barrier, but they trusted in their team to reinforce and turn it around. And now Bolts, with a power play to claw back some of this gold they've lost now.
Yeah, they're down like 3 or 4K at the moment. It feels like the Titans were in such higher control of the game up until that FG siege there, and that just shows you how important finding one pick can be, especially at the highest level here in the SPL. So now a chance, and you talk about clawing back some of that gold. Only one tower has been taken by the Bolt so far, and it's on the left-hand side of the map, whereas on the other side, it's all Tier 2s left remaining. So this is a great opportunity over the next 3 minutes or so for the Bolts to find themselves a bit of a pocket of gold. That said, you wonder how cautious the Tartarus Titans really are going to be here in a moment like this. Effectively mirrored. Everyone who's level 20 on one side is level 20 on the other side. Still maybe sensing an opening for some aggression.
Difference for the Titans is they can get aggressive against anyone, and it's Jake who's in trouble.
And Scary D is in on the chase and will pick up the kill onto Awesome Jake, but it's a Valkyrie's discretion from Cyclone Spin on the back end of things. And this effectively stalls out the rest of this FG push unless the Olympus Bolts are able to find a pick, and it's a Roar being auto-attacked by Barracuda in onto the back end, who will transform now beneath the Tier 2 tower. Benji on a killing spree. Barracuda uses the Petrify, but it's a split engagement with a few members being chased down on either end, and Aurora takes the portal, but Barracuda's on the other end. Lasbra falls on one side. It's a 3-for-1 trade. Titans happy about it.
Oh, and Paul and Cyclone both half health in the mid lane, but they've got Benji and Scary still coming back in again. Not a whole lot Haddix and Barra can really do about this if they want to continue pressuring this mid lane. Good news is there's no minions for the Titans to use to take this tier 2, although right-hand side is exposed, and that makes sense from the Titans. Once again, though, these engagements, as we saw, Olympus Bolts can only really take apart one by one and look for a prime target, whereas Titans, they started that fight off with looking at Yamoja, who was far forward, and then one by one had Kukulin just run at people with Valkyrie's discretion bat out of hell supporting the whole time through.
Cyclone Spin takes down the Primal Fury, but Barracuda was in range, so Cyclone immediately has to leave. If you have the Fire Giant power play stat tracker going on the top left of your screen, you don't want to see a negative number in the gold differential or the XP differential. We've gone the wrong direction now if you're the Olympus Bolts. 5K down in the XP department and a few K down in the gold department there as well. And I think that was kind of akin to what I was trying to get at before that fight broke out, where even despite having the FG, the Tartarus Titans were still in a spot where they were up in gold. They probably felt somewhat comfortable at stepping up there in moments like that. And
yeah,
it's just an unfortunate pick out, it feels like, on Jake. That kind of stalls everything else out. But Jake maybe not too worried about getting picked out anymore. He's picked up the Spear of Desolation on the emoji. A little extra damage is maybe what the Bolts need.
I mean, I will say, when we talk about Fire Giant secure and actually objective damage, I'm not sure if Cyclone's going to be able to do too much against the FG in these games. I mean, he'll survive a long time, as you saw against the Gold Fury. But I do think that was definitely something Bolts needed, was taking the FG away from Titans to hold on the game. Lasbro's getting aggressive against Benji, though. But it's Benji!
Benji finds a big knock up here on the front line, and Benji taken low as Barracuda just autoing on the other side of the River's Rebuke. This will call it has to leave, but Benenu says no way to that one. It's a Riptide on back from Awesome Jake as Aurora and Scary D leap on into the backline. Frenzy gets used here, bat out of hell. One more tick onto Barracuda. Scary D's got it, but Paul, he's found one onto Haddix on the back.
And Haddix is doing what he can on the backside there too. Great little pick by Ven just there on Scary. But Haddix is doing what he can. He's running at the backline, keeping him busy, but he can't hold off the damage that Freya is going to put out in this game. And now it's Titans again. 2v2 in terms of losses here. Oh, no. Goes too far forward.
Aurora de-transforms, and it's a Riptide placed by Awesome Jake. And that could be a big moment here. That's a pretty big stagger as well. Look, you got Benji in 20 seconds, and Aurora is going to be 20 seconds. Basically every 15 seconds from here on out, somebody's going to be back and respawning. The Fire Giant won't be back up in that time, but this is a great opportunity for the Bolts to drop down some ward coverage and establish control here before the next Fire Giant.
Yeah, because there's nothing else that we can really take. Gold Fury's down, neutral camp's down. Might as well just continue to farm up. The pace of this game has been pretty ridiculous, if I'm honest. It has. From the early stages.
You said it'd be fun, right?
I knew it would be, because there's a little bit less in the line, you know, but there's still bragging rights, and obviously Bolts would love to close out the group with the 2-0 here.
Undefeated,
and, you know,
too.
won every single one of their games in the groups, and you're starting to see where fans of the Bolts have been all year. This was one of the only teams that pretty much stuck together coming into the season. Obviously, they brought hi-rez in, who's been a great addition to the squad. You're starting to see why they chose to stick together. They have confidence in themselves. They have confidence in each other.
Agreed. The Bolts have just shown up here flat out so far in Season 8. Cyclone Spin uses Valkyrie's discretion. So now, that slipperiness that Freya has is definitely mitigated, especially as the FG respawns.
hi-rez and Lasba this game are all they're after is the target that is used an ultimate every single time. That ult's on cooldown, that's where we're looking. Freya is susceptible. Keep an eye on Cyclone's positioning.
Oh, but Benji finds his way into the backline of the Bolts, as he so often does, through space and time, flies on in. Barracuda taken low, and Scary D, bat out of hell, will pick up the Medusa. Now Awesome Jake trying to stay alive, but he will not, as Benji adds another now for the Tartarus Titans. And what a rough place to get picked out for the duo lane of the Olympus Bolts. Fire Giant is up. Frenzy's going to get used. It is melting quickly, and the Tartarus Titans will secure the objective.
Yeah, I should have taken into account that Coerce and Aurora coming into play quite big there around that objective, and now hi-rez on the run from the left. But meanwhile, Venenu slips the noose. Paul can't, though. Overextended too far. That'll hurt the Titans a little bit, or will it? Because Ven's still on the run.
Yeah, Benji's the one chasing him down. Lasbra up and over the wall, and here come the Titans right down the right-hand side of the map. hi-rez alone now in the back as well. Look at the damage Cyclone Spin's going to be able to do. Lord of the Afterlife used defensively. It's an interesting moment for the Titans with the right side Phoenix being looked at. Venenu's alone.
Yeah, it's a decision between going for kills or going for the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is the correct call here. They'll have minions soon, but Lasbra's wrapping around the back.
Barracuda and Jake are up in the next 5 seconds as well. You can't overstay here if you're the Tartarus Titans. Venenu with a big double pull has found damage as well. The right side Phoenix falls. hi-rez will not, however. And the Osiris survives a little longer. It's a beautiful Riptide as Venenu finds the first kill onto Aurora. Cyclone Spin back down to earth, and Barracuda notches his second of the game. Now the Tartarus Titans full on retreat. Only 2 left with the FG.
They've got to chase them, though. If they continue chasing down here, maybe get themselves a couple of towers. Problem is there's no Fire Giant on land, and if Lasbra dies by going too deep alone, this could be awkward.
But can he buy in time for the rest of the Bolts to get back in? It's bad out of hell, but where will Scary D come down? Right on the other side of Venenu, who is on a rampage now. 5 straight, 9-1-3 for the Merlin of the Olympus Bolts.
Not terrible for Titans, though. If you look at what's up on the map, what can Bolts even do? They lose their Phoenix, they get some kills, sure, Dave, but there's nothing up, so they can't really go and do much other than take a couple of towers. If you're going to die as the Titans, that's the best time to do it.
It is. You get the Phoenix. It is the right side Phoenix. So if the Bolts are going to lose anything, maybe it's that one where the next FG is up. You're a little bit closer to contest some of those firemen. I mean, you don't want any of your Phoenixes to be down, of course, but if it's got to be one, the one over by the Fire Giant that will be enhanced next time, definitely will feel good. Paul, looking at the Oni Fury here, a chance to steal it once that through space and time is back up. Oni Fury will help here for the Bolts as well, mitigating some of that pressure that you can already see building on the right.
Definitely, but also force Titans to maybe go on the back foot for a second or two, allow themselves to reset, get a couple of relics up, because relic situation for the Bolts isn't great right now.
Oni Fury taken down low. Will Aurora steal it away? He will not. There's a knock-up, though. Is Awesome Jake is half HP now. Benji looking to continue his tear through this Olympus Bolts roster, but everyone looks like they'll be able to get themselves out and safe. And the Oni Fury secured safely by the Bolts.
Good stun though onto Aurora, and Aurora has to leap away. The chase is up from hi-rez too. Whole squad coming through the Riptide, and they'll get hit. Meanwhile, Lasbra trying to take on a squad, has to jump away, but hi-rez is in.
It's double-digit alert now for Venenu. 10 kills on the board, and he wants some more as Scary D leaps away beneath his Tier 1 tower. Paul weaving in the damage as best as he can. 3 members of the Tartarus Titans left in the zone as Cyclone Spin rounding out the backside here. It's going to be a tier 1 taken by the Bolts.
Not really spoken about, but then anyway, he's having one hell of a series here today. His game 1 Morrigan play was fantastic, but this Merlin play, he's shot up to 37,000 now based off these engagements.
Oh my God.
10, 1, and 3. And when you look at what's happened to the Barracuda in these engagements, he's doing a great job of this Merlin of staying in position, using the flickers on the right moments to avoid a lot of this damage.
Barracuda's got to go back to base here because the fire minions of the Olympus Bolts, though caught up on the right-hand side,
Just in time.
are making their way right back into the base now of the Olympus Bolts. Fire Giant not up, so this one relatively clean to deal with for the Olympus Bolts. And that's a smart moment there. You take that engagement, you grab a couple of towers, you go back to base. Fire Giant's going to be up in a minute and a half now. And so dealing with those waves now rather than letting them crash on into your base and having to deal with them later, the right play for the Olympus Bolts. And so now it feels like so often this game we've talked about, can you find this pick onto Paul? Can you find this pick onto Cyclone Spin?
Can you find the pick on Venenu?
Can you find the pick onto Venenu?
Yeah.
Seems to be the storyline.
Definitely. I mean, he's only had 1 death so far this game, but his damage numbers speak for themselves about how much he's managed to turn some of these fights around. And taking into account, I mean, the Titans, they've had Fire Giant a couple of times. That regen is something you're going to have to get through. And keeping him pinned back like that or keeping the front liners down is very important. That's why you can see his build there very much focused on penetration, survivability, and get as much out as he can on every rotation.
Yeah, Soul Reaver, just kind of the icing on the cake of the penetration build that Venenu has gone for here. Seems like just a few volleys, whether it's Ice Stance or the Purple Stance, where you can pull some in, tick down some of that damage. These frontliners starting to melt just a little bit. Cyclone Spin, look, you've obviously reached the point here. You're level 20, you're full build. This is the full power of the Freya. It's about not getting those Valkyries' discretion forced out, right? I mean, over the last FG, you saw it used early, and then Cyclone Spin couldn't play as aggressively as he'd like to. So that's maybe the key of the game for both sides. Let's lock down this Merlin on one side. On the other side, let's see if we can force some of these defensive utilities out of the Tartarus Titans if you're the Olympus Bolts. Relic's in a pretty good spot. Both teams somewhat healthy here. Paul 15 seconds away from his beads, but everyone else fully stocked up.
Yeah, and this Fire Giant dance will be an interesting one because we just saw the burst potential Titans have with that coerce from Fafnir just to increase everyone's damage output on the FG. At 35 minutes, this one could change the game if Bolts get it too. Enhanced Fire Giant swings the game so quickly in the other team's favor.
You have to be careful as long as Paul is on the map. Even if you're the Bolts and you win a pretty handy fight, get a few members of the Titans down, as long as that through space and time is there, there's always going to be a slight threat at a steal away. Remember, the Olympus Bolts last time, they felt very comfortable with Barracuda and Jake just pulling the FG while the rest of the Bolts were pushed forward. And it looks like something similar is going to happen here. Venenu throws some damage over the wall. Paul is going to have to join the fight likely with the through space and time if the Fire Giant continues going down as quickly as it is. Benji leaps over the wall. Fire Giant down beneath half HP as Barracuda repositions. But now the Olympus Bolts choose to go. Scary D has found Venenu, but he has not gotten the kill. It's a flicker away to secure his life, and Scary D will drop down out of the sky as Lasbro leaps away from over on the backside. A couple of chains from Haddix could find some lockdown here through space and time. Flies on in and clips a little bit of damage away from the Osiris.
But look at what Jake's doing. Sustain, 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 sustain. Over and over again with this Yamoja, just forcing the Titans forward and leaving opportunities for his teammates to find kills because everyone's still alive. The scatter has happened, but the abilities have been used by Titans, and the Bolts are still coming at them.
And here they come right around the backside. Scary D leaps away. Venenu throws the damage up and over the wall. The Fire Giant still left standing, but Paul is not on the map. Instead, the Olympus Bolts, maybe the easier objective secure here, is the Pyromancer. You imagine, though, the eyes have to be towards the FG shortly.
They've really changed the game plan a little bit here, Bolts, smartly too. Haddix still running at the back line. Lasbro trying to pick somebody off in the engagement. Meanwhile, Jake sat with the backliners now. He's just throwing out sustain, making sure nobody gets jumped on. And if they do, I'll Rivers Rebuke if I have to and get even more healing onto you. If you can't burst them down here now, the Bolts are going to be a problem.
This is a good opportunity for the Olympus Bolts because Rivers Rebuke is back up. If you need to use it to secure the FG, it's there. As the Fire Giant now taking low. Winds of Shamash gets used. There are a couple members of the Titans within range. This is a big one to secure as Barracuda grabs the kill onto Aurora and grabs the secure onto the enhanced Fire Giant. Valkyrie's discretion crashes down from Cyclone Spin, and he's alone. He will fall, and Barracuda's got a double.
And that's exactly what you want. You're the Bolts, and now they're the ones in control. They were on the back foot here, Dave, for so long, just because they couldn't find a target to pick. And in the later stages of the game, guess what happens? Sustain comes into the mix, and all of a sudden, Merlin, who's having a field day of getting damage out, 45,000. This is a great performance from the Bolts to show that they can still take it on even when they're up against him.
And it feels like the Olympus Bolts just a few moments away from closing out their group stage with an undefeated record. This was a very difficult group to get that done in, but Venenu, when you're playing the way he is, it's going to be hard for any of the other teams. Tartarus Titans, they will crumble today, and the Olympus Bolts find the 2-0.
I don't think that's very fair to the Titans with how that last game just ended. No. Because the scoreline throughout that entire game was, in terms of kills at least, Titans. They got to 22 to 20
even at the end.
Right at the end, they got ahead for the first time. And the Bolts did a great job of holding on and playing the defensive game, which was, we can't pick off a target. We don't get a choice to. We have to let them come onto us and counteract it.
That was some fun, though, right? A great way to end out the group stage. It was a 42-kill game in 36 minutes. The biggest trend this year for the Bolts, obviously they've cleaned up some of their shot calling, but the big name player, the Venenus, Barracuda had a rough start to that game. But I think Ven, not only this weekend, but just this year on a whole, is playing out of his mind.
Definitely, but he's comforting the squad and comforting the team too. Because I think a lot of players in the league as a whole, they're all individually talented, but when they play as a unit is when they're most scary and when they feel comfortable and happiness on a team is very, very key.
The Olympus Bolts end their group stage run a perfect 3-0 against some very difficult teams here in this group. That is the last game of the weekend, though, and that means we'll take a break, and the desk will take us home.
fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's a lot of cores.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
And what's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. And speaking of Alienware, one of the main reasons why I'm able to keep up with all of the jam-packed action that's been taking place throughout this SPL group stages is thanks to these nice little Alienware laptops that they've been so kind to provide. And that's not to mention the Alienware PCs that you could have for yourself if you head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Make sure to use code SMITEAW and you can find yourself with a very nice either primo laptop to keep up with the score just like me, or you could even get the PC, whatever floats your boat. Either way, look good, feel good, play good. That's always been the motto in my book. And Gore, speaking of play good, I mean, I think we saw enough of that from both the Bolts and the Titans in game number 2.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans come out to just absolutely play for what felt like, 20, 25 minutes there? I mean, a long portion of that game. And then Venenu decided that he didn't want to lose the game, and everything started to fall in line. I think there's a lot more to it for the Bolts than that, but the slash lines are definitely indicating one thing. I think the Merlin definitely got to shine bright. And we were talking about it, but like Freya isn't really in the meta, not because she's not good, but because the play style right now doesn't really facilitate letting her through.
It just seemed a little bit tough there for the Tartarus Titans because right now, name of the game has definitely been revolving more heavily around that frontline sector. And so when the frontline has to invest a ton of their time and effort into keeping their carry alive or just playing around this area in general, it just gave Venenu so much space, and he was able to really utilize his positioning excellently throughout this match.
I mean, yeah, it was continually throughout this game where it was just so difficult to try and figure out how to get to Vin. I mean, he had one death the entire time around the middle of this game. Otherwise, was absolutely able to run the show. And I think he might have had no deaths, maybe only one death in game number 1 as well. Very, very low death count for him this set, though. And high impact. I mean, he was one of the players that I thought was incredible there in game number 1 as well. And so it seems to have transitioned easily for them here. To the point where, I mean, if the Bolts are looking like this is a very dangerous team that you're now looking as your top seed here going into the playoffs.
You think Barracuda was having fun that game on the Medusa?
I think Barra just has fun. I don't know if that game was like the pinnacle of fun for him. I mean, 4-7, he was definitely like, at one point he was 1-7, and you know he wasn't very happy about that. But then I'm sure he started to relax. Like, Venenu started doing well, and I think he enjoyed that vicariously.
No, for sure. I think that it was really cool, though, to kind of see that transition take place throughout game number 2, where it became less and less about trying to make sure that Barra could stay alive in that match for the Bolts, and more about just following through with the power play potential that Venenu was bringing to the board.
Venenu did 46,000 player damage.
Yeah, that's
there was a lot of things I wanted to say. I had a good response, and I looked down and I read that, and my mind literally flushed every sentence that I had available. It just disappeared.
Gore, for all the times that I hear, oh my god, Korea is so powerful, ADCs are so strong, and then we get 47,000 damage Merlin. Are you guys kidding me, aggro? And you think hunters are strong? Don't lie to yourselves. Venenu wasn't lying to us with that player damage. We saw the kind of impact he brought.
Yeah, look, we saw the slash lines. It was 11-1, 47,000 player damage versus 4-7. Look, I'm just saying. I don't know whose side I'm on. And you know what? Give supports more damage. That's what I want. I want to be able to do something other than tell that guy to kill him.
Well, the most indirect level of support, I think, was also coming from Lasbra in that jungle position. He was just working hand in hand alongside of Venenu, and fortunately for us, we actually have Lasbra for the post-game interview to help try and break down some of the things that were taking place in this set. Lasbra, first things first, how's the team feeling heading into the playoffs?
Oh, we're feeling pretty good, you know, securing first seed. That is pretty nice. I think it's the first time we're in first seed going into a LAN tournament, or it's not LAN, right, but playoffs tournament. So that's pretty nice.
And how's everything kind of been for the team? Because from where you guys were in week 1 to where you guys are currently sitting heading into that playoffs, what would you credit the most to this development in the team standings?
I mean, it hits everybody. I don't think I could put like just one player and one name on it. I think like Ro has been stepping up a lot this year. Not that he did bad last year, but he's been really smooth. Haddock's coming in on the squad. Everything is just so easy, and we're just having a lot of fun. And I think if you have fun and you're good friends, it makes everything a bit easier.
Well, the synergy is certainly showing for all of us throughout your sets, but for you individually, what do you think has been one of the more difficult processes as a jungler?
I mean, you see a bit of, I don't know if you can call it a tank meta, but you're going a bit more bruisery. You kind of want to be a bit more sit up. You can't always just, you know, if you play Susano, go one-shot somebody. So it's more like sometimes play sit-up, sometimes just make sure your carries stay alive, like we did last game with Ven. If you just kept him alive, you just knew you could win every team fight.
Definitely saw that as being the main game strategy for you guys in game number 2. But honestly, Lasbra, congratulations to you guys on all of your success throughout this group stages. Looking forward to seeing what you guys have for us during that playoffs time period. And other than that, thank you for joining us on that post-game interview, and hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
Thank you, you too.
Oh, he's such a nice guy, man. Lasbra just, he gets it. He understands sometimes you get to be the big burst damage centerpiece as the jungler. Other times you have to try and orient yourself more towards just playing that setup factor for his team. But when it comes down to it, Gore, I think that I'm very happy with what we saw here throughout the group stage.
Yeah, I think we got a lot more interesting things. And again, one of my favorite things that could have happened here was the fact that it was kind of a fresh slate, right? Any of those teams that had started to gravitate towards the bottom because of not so great weeks 1, 2, and 3 had opportunities to jump forward and make ways to playoffs that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
And you can see it here in the standings alone. Olympus Bolts will clinch out as Group A's number 1 with that 3-0 set victory standing. They have certainly marked themselves, I think, as a prime or strong team for that playoffs period. Atlantis Leviathans, though, Tartarus Titans not far behind. The same can be said for Group B standings. Oni Warriors, Jade Dragons, Solar Scarabs, even the Camelot Kings, for what it's worth. Incredibly close matchups all the way through. And I just really am looking forward to seeing what playoffs has in store for us.
Yeah, that Group B. Look, a lot of people coming into this, they saw Group B and thought, man, Dragons, the Kings just have their free tickets to playoffs, I guess, and now we see how different things have been for them. And I think showcasing how difficult this is going to be. I mean, you know, for first off, everybody to at least have gotten a 1 save for the Valkyries, everybody getting a win in all these sets, pushing forward, even with the Kings not being there, there's going to be a highly contended week of games, or weekend of games, I guess, for this group stage. Because now you can kind of feel like everybody wants to get on. Like, Phase 1 doesn't have the grand scheme world's affectation that it could in like Phase 2, Phase 3, and the way that it did last year. But being able to come out and be the top team just for a little bit is still one of the best feelings that you can have.
One thing's for sure, Gore, and I think especially based off of the results from all of these matches that we have seen from these teams in both groups, this is anybody's game right now, and I definitely looking forward again to that playoffs period. But for you guys back at home, just make sure that you keep an eye out at SMITE Pro over on Twitter.com, because the schedule for playoffs will be posted there shortly after this whole group stage and everything is kind of settled down a little bit. But that's going to be a wrap for us here at the studios. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. And like I said, make sure to keep your eyes peeled over at SMITE Pro on Twitter.com. The schedule will be coming. And other than that, I hope you guys enjoy the matches. Real looking forward to seeing you guys again next week for the playoffs themselves. And other than that, you can peach it. We'll see y'all next time.